Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending the Rockport Select Board meeting, October 11th, here in the infamous Jeff Parker room. I'll call the meeting to order, and we'll start off first with public hearings, and we have 4 of them. The first one would be the public hearing to give interested members of the public an opportunity to comment on the amendments to the General Assistance Ordinance and Appendices A through H effective October 1st, 2022. All those in favor? Are there any against? And these have been made public either at the town office, and I'm assuming on the website if they were to check.
Absolutely.
Okay, hearing none in favor and none against. The board wishes to move to the next one. And B is a public hearing for downtown TIF amendment. That's a tax incremental funding or some wording along those lines. And again, they're made public at the town office and/or online. Anyone in favor of the TIF for the downtown? It's an amendment. There's already one that's existing.
When
It's
you
just
say in
an
favor, you mean does anybody want to come up and
Speak
talk?
in favor.
Speak in favor.
Yeah,
of.
speak in favor, correct. Anyone want to speak against the amendment to the downtown TIF? Hearing neither for or against, we'll move on to C, public hearing for Route 90 TIF approval. And as a little side note, that is for us to better be able to accommodate through grant monies, the extension of our sewer, which stops at approximately the high school, and we want to go towards Route 17. And there are a number of interested parties that have potential, growth potential on their properties. So that's the reason that that's been asked for. Are there any parties that would speak in favor of the Route 90 TIF approval? Any parties speaking against the Route 90 TIF approval? Hearing and seeing none, we will move on to D, public hearing for all other items on November 7th, 2022 referendum election ballot. And again, these things were made available at the town office and/or on the website. Is there anyone wanting to speak in favor of the referendum election ballot, November 7th, 2022? Anyone wanting to speak against the November 7th, 2022 referendum election? Okay, we will have the public meeting closed, and we will move on to the town manager's report.
Well, thank you. This is a 7-page report, so I'll try to boil it down to 40 or 50 minutes. That's a joke. Good news, congratulations to the town of Rockport. We received 2nd place in the Maine Municipal Association's annual report contest. This is a program that MMA has held for at least 50 years or so. There are a number of opportunities where Rockport has been in first, second, or third prize, but this is the first time in, I think, about 6 or 7 years that we were one of the top 3 in our category. It's based upon population and so forth, that in terms of the category, those who are competing against. And Superior, although it makes you sound like you should be number 1, means you're number 2. I don't really try to fight that battle, but anyway, it makes me feel like we're number 1. But nevertheless, we got the 2nd prize in that. Many thanks to Diane, who put that report together, and all the staff and committees and community groups who submitted information to put together through that for that effort. You know, I think the annual report isn't maybe what it once was, where it was sort of that must-see reading. As soon as it came out at the post office, everybody ran over to grab the box and grab their copy. But it's still an important piece, and it's actually by statute, it's something we have to follow. And it's a really good summation of your year, and when you go back in terms of the historical record, I hate to say it, but perhaps the minutes from this meeting or conversations from committee meetings won't stand the test of time, but by going back and leafing through those Old Town reports or of a given year, you can really follow the trends and the conversations of what's been going on in that community over that given year. So the annual report's an important part of that, and I'm glad and proud to say we were award winners this year. So that's a nice thing. Congratulations to all of those who were helping put that together. We did get our fuel bids back and opened fuel bids last week, or I guess a couple weeks ago. And luckily, our bids did come in under budget. As you all remember, as we were going through the budget process, we needed to add some more funds into the budget, about $50,000, to ensure that we wouldn't be over budget in our fuel budgets in various departments. And thankfully, these bids came in under those estimates, so we'll be able to operate with a surplus in those lines at least, assuming we have the same usage as we anticipate. So that's some good news. That doesn't always occur. Moving through here, Public Works has been pretty busy over the last few months. Anyone who's sort of come through Central Street, obviously the paving that Maine DOT put through, but obviously cleaning up around the harbor. There's a number of different projects that have been tackled over the last month, some significant culvert replacements, Meadow Street, Forest Street West. There's some issues over on Reflection Pond Drive. We had to paint those stop bars over in Simon's Corner after the paving from this past summer. And, just some normal catch-up work, sign installation, and so forth. There is some forthcoming projects. We already talked about the risers for paving, but a pretty significant large culvert be placed on Mount Pleasant Street, and then paving those storm damage sections of Mount Pleasant. So there's quite a bit on that end of things, as well as preparing for winter. The winter stand's already been put up, so we're prepared on that end. We have salt left over from last year. At some point, the sanders will go back in the trucks, and we'll all be sad about that fact, because that means it's over for us and winter weather's coming. But that's on the way, and they are making those preparations now. Talked about the deputy harbor masters later on, so I'll skip over that. The UTV has arrived that had been ordered from the spring. As part of the budget process, and training has already occurred. I mentioned here in the report where Chief Peasley met up with Thomaston Fire for the trails out in the Thomaston Town Forest. A number of members of our department were certified this weekend. State certified instructor put them through a course over at the Snow Bowl on Saturday, and so a number of our volunteer firefighters are now authorized to use the UTV, which is a great thing. Number of job opportunities here at the town, both Public Works. We have a new opening in the admin assistant position at Planning and Community Development. Sad to say Shenley Neely, our crackerjack bundle of fun that is our admin assistant over there. She's leaving for a nice step up in pay and responsibilities with the town of Camden. It's a great opportunity for her. But we'd love to have someone else join the team. So if you're interested, reach out to myself or Orion. We'd certainly like to have someone come on board soon. We've made great headway in that department with our new online Gov pilot program that Orion has been working on since, feels like a year ago, probably. And Shenley was a big part of putting that into place. And now we have that up and running. So very exciting. And of course, a video tech. We have Jeff Parker, whose name is on the door, but we could also hire someone to fill some of those duties. So love to have that take off. There's a brief bit of update in here about the comprehensive plan and the tour of Rockport. And I think, some of the big takeaways from those conversations, highlighting the issue of balance and the need for balance in all we do, business and the environment, balance in our environment, balance in our economy, balance of housing options, so ensuring that we're not out of kilter with who Rockport is and who Rockport's been. And I think that's a really nice way of putting that. It's highlighting that word balance. Everyone who's moved here for a reason, because they like the balance. Those who've lived here live here because they like the balance. So ensuring that through our comp plan effort will be great, and see how we turn that into action. Let's see. I think that's about it. I do have a couple quick notes. We were successfully awarded $30,000 for the McCog, I guess, organized public safety grant program that they had received $910,000 for Midcoast Maine. Rockport will receive $30,000 of that. Much of that will be dedicated towards technology and infrastructure upgrades, a new server at the police department, and replacing workstations and machines for our officers. So very excited about that. There were a number of challenges with that grant because a number of the sort of strictly police department related items you couldn't use the grant for, so it was a little bit difficult. But we're lucky to. These were needed upgrades, and so it's not we're staying on course there. And then on this coming Friday, Senator King is going to host a meeting over in Rockland with a number of town managers in the region to talk about climate resilience. We're going to talk a little bit about that later on tonight, but trying to, Hannah Pingree will be hosting and moderating that conversation as well. So it should be, Senator King is also hosting or is speaking Friday night at the Strom Auditorium at the high school. If those are interested, they can sign up. It's a free event about foreign relations. So this is a precursor to that. So before you listen to him talk about the foreign relations, we're going to be talking about things that are very much near and dear to what we're dealing
We
with
can
now.
actually talk about democracy.
That seems important too. Seems like a universal, right? What's that? Yeah.
Speaking of the high school, on Friday, Marcia Steinglass and I will be addressing the student body in the morning with regard, been given or granted, blessed with a 5-minute window to make a pitch for the participation of the student body to fill out the questionnaire on the comprehensive plan committee.
Awesome.
And hopefully Marcia and I can get it done in 5 minutes. Be a lot of quick talking.
Quick talking, yeah. It's tough to do.
So hopefully they participate.
Absolutely. There's a lot in here, but those are the high points at the moment, so.
Okay. Are there any public inputs on non-agenda items? Is there anyone online or any text messaging questions or anything that's not on the agenda this evening?
None that I've seen, no.
All right. All right. Now, I had mentioned earlier, the next one is the amendments to the agenda. And I had asked in a roundabout way if we might be able to take our Northeast Ambulance personnel and allow them their, I'm going to say 10 or 15 minutes, just to narrow it down. But yeah, well, I'm seeing what I've got to look forward to Friday. But Jonathan has had the opportunity to engage our other 3 towns with the same presentation. And it's just sort of letting you know we're still around and, we're working to make things better for everybody. And please come on up and.
Wait, that you just want to amend the agenda, but shouldn't we go through the consent agenda? You're
Well,
you're requesting that we amend the agenda to move northeast
Well, the next
up.
one on the list of things is amendments to the agenda.
Right, so, but we don't actually do the agenda item, we just amend the agenda to move them up.
Correct.
So where do you want to move them?
If you walk in that direction, we'll have you ready in a minute.
Are you
All right,
saying you
so-
move them even up ahead of the consent agenda? Or,
I'm going to have them ready to go after the consent agenda because,
okay,
but I'm just saying the amendments to it will be them coming as first in line after the consent.
right, I thought you were calling
And I
them up
didn't-
right now to talk.
Well, by the time he gets ready to talk, we'll have taken care of the other business, I'm hoping. All right, so, do we have a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented?
I move the board approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second?
All those in favor? Unanimous, 4-0. And now the amendments to the agenda.
And a quick thank you to Rick Cowan and Andrea
Parks and
Hungerford for their
Beautification.
service on Parks and Beautification.
I think that it's normally that Diane takes a moment or two and sends a card of thanks, if I'm not mistaken, from previous.
Yep.
That would be wonderful. So, the amendments to the agenda are under the action items. We would like to have, or excuse me, the discussion items, we'd like to have the EMS provider update. Look, there you are, and we're done talking. If that adjustment to the agenda is suitable for everyone.
Sure.
Perfect.
Appreciate it. Thank you all for having me. As Mark had said, I thought this was a good opportunity, now that we're on the backswing or the downward slide of COVID, to get back into in-person meetings. And I take the opportunity to come out and introduce myself. I started with Northeast Mobile Health Services at the height, probably the worst time possible of the pandemic, to take on these responsibilities. But my name is Jonathan Powers. I'm the division chief for Northeast Mobile Health Services here in Rockport. I am your local EMS director by contract, and wanted to come out and at least introduce myself to you folks, especially since we have a few new faces on the boards. And it's been a couple of years since we've had the opportunity to come out and speak to any of the boards, really. Just a little introduction about myself. I come with 22 years of experience in EMS. Most of that has been in the Mid-Coast area. I've also worked for the state regulatory office, Maine EMS, doing licensing, overseeing the computer systems and all the data collection and all those fun things. So my presentation is full of data, because that is my kind of passion with EMS data. I'm not going to go through this slide by slide, so if anybody's nervous about me killing you with a PowerPoint presentation, that's not what I do. I think the data kind of speaks for itself. I just really wanted to give you the high-level review of what we've done over the last contract year. This year's contract had a lot more deliverables than any of the other previous years, and we've made a lot of steps, and I'm very proud of what my staff has accomplished over the last couple of years. So I did want to provide a quick update about our division staffing. For our entire company, we are one of the better staffed divisions. We are very fortunate. I have a lot of very dedicated staff that are willing to put in the extra hours, even though nationwide we are seeing a huge deficit in EMS providers for a number of reasons. A lot of folks retired, and they didn't want any part of this pandemic. And I don't blame them. A lot of them had pre-existing health conditions, and this had a lot of unknowns. It was safer for them to just protect themselves and their families, and it was time to just say, thank you, we're out. We also had a lot of time, didn't have a whole lot of time to do classes. We relied a lot on new classes coming in, a lot of the colleges providing classes, and a lot of the colleges we saw close down. We didn't see a whole lot of uptick in distance learning with EMS because a lot of it's hands-on. We want folks to get clinical experience, and while we did waive some of those requirements in time, it still had an impact on what we're seeing for students that are coming out that have successfully passed any of the challenges of the National Registry or any of our other licensing regulations. So we haven't seen the influx of folks coming back. There was about a 1,500 licensee turnover annually in EMS when I was at the state office. So we lost 1,500 at least per year. we didn't see nearly that many coming in. So nationwide, statewide, even our small little county has seen a real problem with being able to fill its staff. I've been very fortunate, and we've maintained 6 full-time EMTs, 3 full-time advanced EMTs, and then I have 5 full-time EMTs, as well as a few per diems that fill in here and there, and then add me into the mix because I still am a very active chief. I work the trucks. In fact, I'm supposed to be on one right now. Thankfully, I have the other 2 are on standby, so they could cover while I'm here. But I'm still very active, whether it be a 2 a.m. transfer that I have to go out on or a 911 response here in the area. We will make sure that a truck rolls. During 2021, we saw the vaccine mandates hit our staff as well. We were very fortunate in my division. We didn't lose any staff. My staff were the first in line. Through a very strong relationship with Windward Gardens at the time, we were actually invited to be some of the first public safety staff to be vaccinated in the area. All of my staff lined up at Windward Gardens, and we got our shots. By December 2020, we were 100% vaccinated, which is before the public safety vaccines were even available. We were very fortunate to really get that first round. We were also one of the first and only ones in the region to have a COVID outbreak in our division. So we were successfully weathered that as well. That was a very long 10 days. Excuse me. Now vaccines are mandated through Maine EMS. We don't have the emergency vaccine mandate anymore. We now have it in our rules that the COVID vaccine is required for all staff. That has also had a little bit of an impact statewide as to the number of providers that came back after the vaccines came out, and they were very hesitant about it. So we're not seeing those folks coming back. So we're still seeing some of those numbers down. We've also, our next wave of concern is that they've added in the flu vaccine to our mandated vaccinations. Hasn't been met as strongly as the COVID vaccine was, but there are those rumblings because, well, it just came out and we're just starting to talk to people about, hey, reminder, you need to get your flu vaccine as well. And in past years, some people opted out. That's no longer an option. If you need to maintain your license, you do have to have the flu vaccine now as well. Our daily staffing, we are maintaining most of the time 3 ambulances for the area. We do dedicate 1 ambulance at all times for 911 transports, and then the other 2 are either available for 911 or transfers. I usually try to send only 1 long distance at a time if we do have 3, but patients do need to move. Our citizens still need to get to tertiary care, higher level of care, back home to hospice. So we do balance those 2, and we've done it fairly well this year with our mutual aid numbers are holding fairly strong, but you'll see as the presentation goes on that our call volume is way up. We'll get to that in a second, but I do have 2 24-hour trucks. So 81 and 82 are my 2 24-hour trucks. We do add a third one on from 8 to 8. That's during the busiest hours, and it allows for the shift changes. We do have a 4th truck here in the area that's used as needed, usually for events or if I can find a partner. They'll usually come in and work with me, and during busy times, we'll staff a 4th truck in the area. We also have a supervisor fly car. It's a paramedic fly car, fully stocked and able to respond. I do use that a fair amount in this area, where I might first respond, and the other ambulance was transporting to the hospital. They'll come in and transport the patient after I make first contact. So we do provide some first response when there's high call volume to the area. My schedule, I know in the slide it says Monday through Friday. I have not seen that schedule since I started. So I'm pretty much available 24 hours a day. I'm on a 24-hour shift tonight, and I'll be in the office tomorrow. And we do what we've got to do to maintain staffing. So our staff, like I said, maintains strong levels. We do have some periods where we drop down. We do drop down to 1 ambulance. That's been some of the staffing challenges that we're seeing now. And when I did the last 3 presentations, I didn't have those challenges. Now I do have those challenges. We are seeing some lulls in our staffing, and getting folks to work has been challenging, but we are maintaining at least the 1 911 truck. We do not use that for any other purposes. That truck is dedicated for 911 coverage of the 4 towns. So despite what you may hear in some of the areas, we do maintain that one truck at all times, 24 hours a day for the area. It's not ideal, but we do make it happen. Our current fleet, we do have some of the best steel in the company. I've got 3 fairly brand new ambulances. You can see that 2 of them are, one's a 2022, 2 of them were purchased in 2020, and then one is a 2016. It's currently having its motor rebuilt. It's also oddly numbered 2020, and it has lived up to that number in every form or every possibility that it can. We also have the Fly Car, which is a little bit older, but it does have low mileage and it's not used a whole heck of a lot. It's well maintained by our fleet department, so our fleet here in the area is much better than it was when I started. There was some pretty rough rigs here. I will say the company did step up for me and provided us some really nice equipment and updated all of that. So in 2021, we were fairly busy. Even though there was a lull in our call volume, we did help provide some of the some energy behind the vaccine initiatives. We did provide 3 community clinics that were all based in Lincolnville, thanks to David in the town of Lincolnville for putting those together. We participated with Maine CDC and vaccinated roughly 590 people in the area, which I'd like to say was all in this area, but we saw some folks that were coming from a very long distance that were in line to get those first vaccinations. It was really impressive to see folks coming to Lincolnville from Gorham and Machias and those areas coming down just because they saw that on the schedule and they could make it that day. It was an interesting time to be speaking with people and what motivated them to come down. We did provide the booster clinics. We did provide one for the Rockport Fire Department. Lincolnville Fire participated in that one. We also provided one for Camden and Hope in their stations. So we tried to get out to the public safety sector as well and provide the booster clinics then. And we also made ourselves available for any of the homebound folks, working with the CDC and DHHS to identify folks who just couldn't get to the clinics. But were interested in getting the vaccine. Those folks tended to have more health conditions that made them more susceptible. So they were very nervous about having folks come into their home to begin with. So we were able to vaccinate a couple of folks in the area through that program. So in the last couple of years, some of the initiatives that we've taken, especially the deliverables within the contract, the very first one was hiring somebody local to manage the Rockport division. That was one of the concerns, was certainly management here. By me standing here tonight shows you that we at least met that one successfully, I think. Hopefully by some of the other initiatives you'll see that we've made a lot of strides in the last couple of years. One of the first places we started to focus on was the service level quality assurance. We really started putting some drive behind making sure that the care that we are providing in the area is of high quality and meets all of the standards. We hired on our medical director, Jonathan Busco, who is a tenured physician for St. Joseph's in Bangor. He's been very active in EMS. He was on the medical direction and practices board for Maine EMS when I was working in the office. And he's a very active medical director. He's shown interest in wanting to come down and ride. Unfortunately, our schedules haven't really meshed up, but he has been down here a number of times to have discussions with our staff, providing education, providing outreach to our staff to keep them up to date. We also hired a quality assurance director, Stephen Almquist, who's a paramedic who came to us, has a lot of experience, has really started putting some effort into expanding what we do for quality assurance and what we do for reviews. Our focus reviews that are required by contractors, we review 100% of our cardiac arrests. So making sure that we're providing the highest level of care in the most dire situations. Patient refusals of transport, we look at 100% of those. Those are high risk situations for both us and the patient. There's a lot of legality behind just not taking somebody and transporting them to the hospital, but there are a lot of folks who call 911 who just don't want to go. So we're reviewing those calls to make sure that the decision-making was appropriate for the staff, making sure that they took all steps necessary to try and convince the patient to go to the hospital, or to at least provide the services necessary for them to stay home with whatever system of care they have, whether that be home health coming in or follow-up somehow. We just make sure that those situations are the safest possible for the citizens. We look at all of our advanced life support interventions that we don't do a whole lot of. Our area, as you see in the data, we send a lot of paramedics out, We don't provide a whole lot of paramedic care because it's just not necessary right now. We're seeing a real huge uptick in our low acuity calls. Folks that 20 years ago when I started in this, I would never have guessed somebody would call an ambulance for some of the things that we're getting calls for.
What are some of those kinds of?
Just general nausea. It's just general nausea. Just came on all of a sudden, feeling nauseous,
And they call 911?
call 911 for it. I mean, I'm not saying there isn't something underlying that,
Right.
you know, they know their bodies better than I do, but there are things that it just didn't seem like we saw a lot of that years ago. And there may be an underlying cause that we're not seeing. It's more for the investigation at the hospital. But there are things that we just didn't expect you'd call an ambulance for is all. So certainly happy to be there for it. It's obviously an emergency for them, and we're happy to be there. It's just we're seeing an uptick in what we would normally deem a low acuity call. So we do review a lot of those interventions, intubations. You'll see there's a whole list in there of things that we've provided in the last couple of years as far as ALS interventions go. And then any calls that are greater than the 95th percentile in response time. And if you have reviewed the contract, you know that we changed our threshold for responses from being an average response time to a percentile. So anything that's greater than 95% of the calls, we review those in depth to find out why those calls took so long. We do provide a report to the quality committee that usually meets. Hasn't met in quite some time, unfortunately, just due to membership. But we do provide a report to the towns as to why those calls took so long. Another initiative that we took on for quality assurance is looking at a national quality assurance initiative, which is taking part in a red lights and sirens review. So making sure that our staff are responding in the safest manner and reducing the amount of time that we use red lights and sirens. Anytime a fire truck or an ambulance, police cruiser, any emergency vehicle responds with lights and sirens, it increases the likelihood of them getting in an accident or causing an accident by 65%. That is a significant risk to the public, especially when you're going for low acuity calls, as we just discussed. Maybe that doesn't require lights and sirens. So making sure that our staff are responding. Right now, even at the beginning of this, we were actually just above the national threshold. So we were actually pretty close to that. We utilize, by utilizing the response assignment plan or using the EMD codes that we use throughout the entire contract to identify emergent response. We use the medical priority dispatch system, which is provided by Knox County 911. When you call in, they code your emergency, reducing it down to just a simple number. And based off of the determined descriptor, the Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta that they code it, identifies the emergent level of their symptoms. So looking for life threats, looking for the priority symptoms such as altered mental status, uncontrolled bleeding, chest pain, respiratory arrest, or difficulty breathing. They identify those priority symptoms and code the call. So we utilize that system, which is reviewed by both the Knox RCC for accuracy, and they hit every state threshold that is available, as well as the company's thresholds. And then we make sure that our responses are appropriate to those. So in the response assignment plan, the Omega Alpha, those are low priority, low risk. We don't respond license sirens to those. Now, a lot of those could be falls with no priority symptoms. So an ankle injury, somebody who just needs a lift assist, someone to help get them up, nausea call, generally alpha level calls, as long as they don't have difficulty breathing or any of those other priority symptoms along with them. Bravo, we kind of leave it up to the crew to determine it, but we generally respond lights and sirens for those. Anything Bravo above, because Bravo really gets into your unknown medicals. So your medical alarms. We don't know what's going on the other end, so we want to make sure that we get somebody there as quickly as possible. Charlie, Delta, Echo, those ones, we also have kind of a mix. Charlie, we leave it kind of up to the crew because we tend to send, that tends to be an advanced level in the national standard, but we're sending paramedics. So we're sending paramedics to the Charlie, Delta, and Echo, which is a requirement under the contract. And at that higher level, we tend to look at a little more detail. So like a stroke is technically a Charlie level. Now, an ambulance might respond to that without lights and sirens if it's been longer than the time period that they can intervene. So if we're outside of that and they're not having any priority symptoms, we might send an ambulance over non-emergency, especially if it's close. So we tend to look at those a little bit differently, and we try to make those appropriate questions or appropriate decisions. We do have we review these, making sure that they are making those appropriate decisions. And right now, we're about 55% of our calls are responding with lights and sirens. So we're right at that line for the national standards.
So if you go, somebody calls you and they're feeling nauseous, and you show up to their house, and they don't want to go in an ambulance, they don't feel like they need to go to the hospital, they just wanted someone to comfort them. Who pays you to have gone there?
It's the subsidies. I mean,
So they don't get
we're paid
billed
to
for
stand by.
that?
Nope, they do not. BLS interventions, we feel like that's part of the subsidy. I mean, that's the services that you're contracting with us to provide. Someone to go over, check on them. We check their vital signs. We make sure that they're safe in the environment that they're in. We make sure that they have no life-threatening symptoms. We may try and convince them to go to the hospital just because we don't know. We don't do labs. We don't have an X-ray. We don't have a CAT scanner.
Right.
So we try to get them to go to definitive care to at least get evaluated by a physician because they have so many more resources than we have. We can't definitively say, no, you're not having an event.
Right.
So we may try and get them to go to the hospital with us or by family member. We may even suggest, well,
Just have
your
someone
husband's here and
driving.
he's able to drive. Why don't you go with him or him or her,
Yeah.
and at least go get checked out. It may even during the day, maybe just call your physician.
Yeah.
Let's check with your doctor's office and see what they recommend. And they might have you come down. They have special hours, or they might say, this is pretty common with the medications you're on, so maybe we'll just prescribe an anti-nausea med. So we do try to direct them to appropriate, but we don't seek reimbursement for that.
I could just see sort of an abuse of the system, that it's like,
In the years I've been doing this, there have been some cases where, we had one lady who used to call us to get her remote control. That's usually a call to law enforcement and say, maybe you should come home have a conversation with her about the appropriate use of 911. There are other avenues that we have for that, but not generally around reimbursement. We usually try to take other means, whether it be contacting a family member and just say, maybe somebody needs to come over and check on Aunt Sally.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody just needs to touch base with her. Maybe she's lonely. We don't know. That's one nice system that Good Morning Camden. They check in with a lot of folks. That did cut down. My understanding was years ago that was put in place, and it did cut down on some of those calls, where it was just she didn't know. They didn't know who to call. He was lonely at home. He's home alone a lot. Now he's checking in with the police department, and those programs do save a lot of resources.
yeah.
So something, things that we can look at as communities to see how we can expand those or maybe incorporate it into our community paramedicine program as we continue to try to get that to
Right, and to try to
traction.
make sure your time is being used
Yeah. So,
most effectively.
there's certain things, we don't see a whole lot of abuse in this area, honestly. We do go in waves where we have some regulars. Those are unfortunately generally short-lived.
Yeah.
For one reason or another, whether they move into a higher level of care out of their home or they pass on.
So, being as I usually have my ear, what about the lift assist when you get called to facilities that have staff and personnel, but they call you to come get someone that's fallen out of bed or fallen out of a wheelchair?
We can thank COVID for the reduction in those numbers. We haven't seen a lot of that, honestly. We do see falls.
It has gone back.
We do see a fair number of falls out of facilities, but generally we transport them for evaluation because, again, they don't have the ability to x-ray them and make sure they don't have a fracture, especially out of the dementia unit. They have no way of truly evaluating these patients. So it's a quick trip to the CT scanner, make sure nothing's broken, and usually it's a little bit of evaluation time, road testing, and we take them back. It's safety. That's really just safety for both the facility and the patient. But we don't see before I started as the director, we did see a fair amount of, he's falling out of bed, we just need help getting him up. The facilities during COVID didn't want us in their facilities. We were a vector. So they really changed their policies and their practices to really address those types of calls, because they're just inviting us in, folks who don't really need to be there. Like you said, they have staff and they're able to get those folks up, but there is a level of liability for them, and they did have to go through some training and their insurance and all those fun things. So, but we're really not seeing those numbers like we used to. Some agencies did start billing facilities. We didn't get to that point. We weren't billing facilities for the lift assists, because again, those are citizens. So we kind of looked at it as, this is the service that we're contracted to provide. So some things that we have looked at for refusals, though, is billing for no transports out of motor vehicle accidents. These are folks who may not be citizens of the area, are utilizing the services in the area, and maybe it's time to start getting some reimbursement from that. So we have been looking into that pretty hard lately, just seeing a huge uptick in the accidents that we saw this year and in previous years. Looking at that.
I know there's a mechanism in place, I assume it's still in place, where if law enforcement, for instance, has a call and the fire department responds, whether it's for, safety of the scene or a car on fire or something, if the driver of the vehicle gets a summons for any type of criminal activity, then we can attach the fire department's time and get reimbursed through their insurance company.
Well, we can bill the insurance company regardless. We don't have to go through restitution. Usually when law enforcement tacks it on to the fines and fees, it's for restitution of some criminal activity involving like the fire department response. And some departments have been very successful with that. My history has not been successful with restitution, because usually that turns into a failure to appear or failure to pay fines. And then you still
But I mean, when we're sending a $400,000 or $500,000 piece of equipment and 15 or 20 people down the road, that's not done inexpensively. So if there is an opportunity, I hope that Jason takes advantage of it.
It did look like half of Rockport's calls were non-citizens. So that's
there was a fair number. A lot of them were accidents. And
Yeah,
Rockport has
car
a fair
accidents.
number of the accidents, especially with 1790 Route 1. A lot of accidents in those areas. We have a few hot spots for accidents. And yeah, there is a fair number. So we have looked at mechanisms where we can start collecting the information, and we can bill.
Yeah.
That's why, being a state that has mandatory auto insurance, it does make it easy. So we have been certainly looking into that.
Yeah,
But those certainly aren't, abuse cases of the system.
No,
Those are-
no, it's just in terms of a town, and the town's taxpayers are paying for you.
Yeah.
So it's like, wait a minute, just because we happen to have some busy roads, and we can't control 17 and 90, that's a DOT thing.
That's why, so I was with Union for a number of years and worked with John on adjusting how those subsidies worked because of accidents. A lot of the accidents through South Hope
Right.
were motor vehicle accidents.
Yeah.
So we did take a hard look at that and how reimbursement worked, and then
And I
started.
think a good chunk of our fire department's time is spent on accidents.
Yeah, I mean, to Mark's point, that's, we have, it's great to have major routes of travel, 1, 17, and 90. Unfortunately, that means a high proportion of your accidents are not actually responding to calls that are of our residents.
residents.
Our 3,600 people are a pretty small percentage of the calls that John's responding, I mean, relatively, and that's, the more we can
Yeah, it's
make
almost
that fit. I mean, obviously, if someone's hurt in Rockport, we want to make sure they get good care, right? I mean, that's just part of what you do. But on the other hand, if there's other ways to make sure everything's made whole in the end, and our residents are paying for an appropriate amount for
Right,
what
if
they're
basically
doing,
what we're doing is providing medical care for people traveling on state highways,
right?
then shouldn't there be some reimbursement coming back from DOT?
Yeah, that'd be nice.
That is a whole nother
I
discussion
know,
to have.
I've totally gotten
For
us
the
off
Blue Ribbon,
subject,
the Blue Ribbon Commission is an EMS commission that is looking at reimbursements. Please submit that. Because they're looking at how the system can be funded. And, EMS has its birth at DOT. The Department of Transportation and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is where EMS was born because of trauma on the highways. So that's where all of our legislation, all of our history comes from NHTSA, and none of our funding. So another piece that we were tasked to do was looking at our response zones and looking at how our response times to different parts of town and how the area or the data was affected. We were primarily operating off of averages. So the average response time to Hope or to Rockport was really kind of skewed because getting out to the north end out on the Hope Town line versus Penn Bay Medical Center for us really skewed. So we broke the town into a number of zones. So the map isn't a really great representation, but it gives you an idea. But we broke Rockport into 4 zones. It started off as 3, but we were still having some trouble collecting the data on that north Route 17 corridor. It also, the zones helped us identify and better utilize our mutual aid partners so that instead of sending somebody up to the Hope Street, Rockland Road intersection from Rockland, which is a long ways for them to go, when Union is just around the corner. Roughly the same distance, but we're not stripping an entire town out of either resource and utilizing those resources more appropriately. Making sure that we weren't taxing one and leaving Union to come down to Rockland. Or some similar situation. So we did break all 4 towns into smaller zones and really granulated how our mutual aid was requested and really looking at how our response times were to different parts of town. So making sure that Rockville has, that's where we're calculating our 95th percentile, is making sure that all of our calls in Rockville are under this threshold. All the areas of Glen Cove are under this threshold. So we can really granulate and see why these areas, if we're exceeding what we would expect in that area versus the whole town. Yeah. So it's really increased my workload, but it has really given us a great insight into our operations and making sure that we are responding in an appropriate manner. So you'll see much more granulated data around our response times in future reports. So for 911 responses for the last year, we did respond to 1,814 total responses in the 4 towns and any of the 911 communities. Our transfers were about the same for last year. We were very busy. You can see over the last 3 years that 2020 was a little lower. 2021 we saw a huge lull, and 2022 came back with a vengeance. As we got into 2022, it has been very busy. Our numbers are well on track for our division being well in the area of 4,000 calls between 911 and our transfer side. And it's about 50-50. So we're seeing a huge influx. With 911, as I said, we're seeing a little bit of an uptick or a huge uptick in the low acuity calls. With our transfers, we're seeing a huge increase in our long distance requests because there's just no staff in any of our hospitals. There's no beds available in our hospitals. And we're sending a lot of people to Massachusetts. We're sending a lot of folks to New Hampshire. We had a request even for rehabilitation. We're not seeing folks going to Quarry Hill anymore. We're seeing folks going to Spalding Rehab in Massachusetts. So we're sending folks all over creation. Unfortunately, it's really concerning for family members who have, their support system for these patients. But it's not just EMS and it's not just law enforcement or fire that's seeing these hits in their workforce. You're hearing it everywhere, and it's hitting our hospitals, our nursing care facilities, our rehab facilities, and we're just seeing this. It's just a trickle-down effect. Our mutual aid responses were up for last year, and they are going to be very up this year, but we're also seeing about 200 more calls for service. So it's no surprise that we're seeing a shift in the number of times that we have had to call on other agencies to assist. A lot of those, particularly for Rockport, are mutual aid responses for just incidents that require more ambulances than what we had at the time. Whether it be when we had 1, 2, or 3 ambulances on scene and we needed 2 more, or we needed a 4th ambulance from another community. We did see a fair uptick in that with some of our accidents, but it was a manageable amount. We didn't see any decrease in care or response times. 95.6% of those all calls had a paramedic. So we're only required by contract to send a paramedic on Charlie, Delta, and Echo level calls, and we did meet that at 99.2%. So nearly 100% of the calls that required a paramedic be sent on the first new truck met that. So we were very proud of that. I was very proud of my staff making sure that we had paramedic coverage when we needed paramedic coverage, but 95.6%, so greater than 95% of our calls still had a paramedic, whether it was contractually required or not. So even our low acuity calls still had a paramedic available to them if something had gone south. So we do try to keep those paramedic trucks staffed. It's not often I do have an advanced level truck, but no matter what, if a truck rolls out of my station, you're at least getting some level of advanced care. They can do cardiac monitoring, they can do defibrillation, advanced can do some advanced airways, medication. So an advanced is just as valuable. They just can't cover the full spectrum of what some patients may need. So as you saw through the call types, if you look through any of the data, like I said, I'm not going to kill you with this one. There's a lot of data in here, and I think a lot of it does speak for itself. And I think looking at some of the older reports before I became division chief, that we have made great strides in making sure that we are providing and hitting all of the expectations of the communities. We are trying to get out there more. We are still trying to stand up our community paramedicine program. We had one years ago, kind of floundered. There wasn't a whole lot of reimbursement for it, but we've seen a new set of energy coming to that at the state level. So we're hoping to jump on that and expand a little bit of what our Jackman project. I don't know if any folks have seen in the news our Jackman project. It was just recently posted about how we're meeting some of the needs with a paramedic in that area, actually manning a clinic up there where there's no care. The closest hospital is either Reddington Fairview or C.A. Dean, which is an hour in either direction or an hour and a half in either direction. So, and we do have paramedics, critical access integrated paramedics that are working with physicians up there to provide a higher level of care than what we're providing. And I really would like to see some of that make it down into this area where you have a paramedic who's going for somebody. You respond to an ambulance, they get there, they find out they have a laceration of the leg, consult with a physician and say, yeah, go ahead and stitch it up. They don't even need to go to the hospital. And we live in a rural enough area, particularly with Hope and Lincolnville, where we moved to a rural area for a reason. We don't want to leave. We don't want to go to the hospital and, down in town. We want to stay right here. This is fine. It's just a scratch. But we don't have that system in place right now, but we do want to see that expand into this area, and we are working to try and get those types of programs into this area. So, did anybody if you had a chance to review the data, any questions over any of the numbers?
Really helpful. I really appreciate the depth
Yeah.
you went into. And
Sounds like this is all in preparation for the 27th meeting. You're getting ready to,
It is a reminder that the next meeting is October 22nd.
6 p.m. in Lincolnville.
That's right. Mr. Kelly, Mr. Annis, I believe, are on that committee. And,
Hopefully we have it. I mean,
the last one was canceled because there was a voting mistiming, and I think the one before that, unfortunately, was due to COVID, because I think half my administration, not related to any of my outbreaks up here, but the Southern administration all came back from Florida with it. So
and I think
enjoy that.
I think some of the mindset here is that even if the voting block isn't there, quorum for that, we should still have the meeting, and whoever's not there can play catch-up, because everybody's being dragged down by unforeseen circumstances.
Unfortunately, I mean, we have these reports available. We do, I send them out to the committee, the town managers. So we do still provide the data
Yep.
as required. But
Thank you.
sometimes the presentation's nice to go along with it to explain a little bit of it.
No, it was very good. Thank you.
yeah, thank you very much.
Any other questions?
No, there's one typo you might want to fix before you make this further public.
Which slide was that?
I don't know, this one, caring for the citizens and visitors.
Oh,
Just a number thing, you got the totals under the Camden, so they don't add up right.
oh, I sent John I sent you a previous version.
Oh,
I did
okay.
catch that before I went to Camden.
Okay, just want to make sure.
I did catch that one before I went to Camden, so there is an updated version of that.
All
I
right.
apologize.
No, that's all right. I just happened, numbers in my head are very easy, so I looked at it and went, wait, something's not right.
Yep, no, that did get corrected. I appreciate that.
Well, just before you disseminate it further.
Unfortunately, two of them were prior to that catch, but
Anyway,
Thank you very much.
thank you. Appreciate your time.
Hope the rest of your night's
Thank you,
quiet.
John.
that's right.
Why you gotta use
Did
the
I
Q?
just jinx you?
You use the Q word.
Yeah.
You know better than that.
I know, I had that pulled many a time, thanks. All right, on the action items. And Jonathan, do you want to give us a little oversight on acting on the committee work plan for the ORC?
You know, since I've got, I think we need to stop hearing from John's here. Since Orion's here and the ORC is his committee, I'm just gonna delegate if that's okay with you.
Yes, well, being your employee, that's why I
Let's
delegated
do
to
it.
you. and-
That's how
Yeah.
it goes. So,
Perfect.
oh, sorry, I should have given you a heads up. I was gonna toss you under the bus like that. Sorry. I'll vamp while you're doing it. So this is the first of what I expect going to be a bit of a run of committees coming in with work plans to you all.
Yes.
Right, and so my hope is that we'll have, the ORC's a bit more, they're used to doing this work, because work plans are really how they get their guidance from this group to really say, this is what we want to accomplish, but also it's their sort of feeding to you, hey, this is what we see, this is what's important. And a big part of that, okay, I'll keep going, thanks, Jeff. A big part of that obviously is LD 2003, which passed this summer and became law. And it's a law that has, I think, some probably good intentions, we'll say, to try to deal with the housing shortage we have in Maine, particularly along the coast, and to try to find some answers to that. The problem is, with LD 2003, is that in many cases it takes home rule and ignores it fully, and is a very top-down approach to dealing with zoning, which is not something we normally do here in Maine. We let communities use their home rule to establish the rules under which those who live in those communities wish to govern themselves, and how they wish to govern themselves and their land use. This sort of turns that on its ear and says, oh, no, we're going to do this, this, and this. So implementation, and a law doesn't go into effect until this summer, but we'll need to take some steps as a community to start to prepare for that. And the last thing I would also say about this is that I would expect a number of municipalities will outright look to challenge the legality of this law, because it does trample on home rule, and that is something that Maine municipalities have held firm to for 200 years, and 200 plus years. So, I think that there are good things that we can sort of accept and are part of our community and could be part of the fabric of what we wish to do, but perhaps not all. And the ORC really is the group in our community that looks at what's coming and what changes it wishes to see put before voters. Again, that's your decision, not theirs. But this is your opportunity to sort of set that wish list of sorts of what you wish to see eventually put together and put on a ballot in June. So, Orion, I'll let you jump from there.
So the only thing that's added onto this work plan would be the last bullet on the, I guess the fourth bullet down, the adjust setback requirements and landscape requirements for zones on US 1 and Route 90 to make lots more attractive for developments, to bring developments closer to the road. The aspect or the thought behind that is, if you got a developer that's developing a parcel, and they have to meet all these setback requirements, and they have to go further back, well, now we're getting into this degradation of the environment, which is cutting down trees, clearing a lot, making it suitable for that. And then they have to, if we're gonna be extending sewer along this, or if they're on US one, then they have to tie into sewer. Then they have to bring sewer all the way back. So that's an extra expense on that development to make it work. So if we want lots to be attractable, then to bring that setback requirement closer to the road so that those buildings can come up closer. So that's what they're looking into right now. The LD 2003, like John just said, that's starting with me, John, and the attorney. And then we're gonna take what we come up with, bring it to the ORC, and then they're gonna look at it and see if that fits with their opinion. And then I'll go through its normal process. Solar ordinance right now, the planning board, so the ORC kicked that to the planning board to kind of come up with something. So they're reviewing a few other ordinances around. They're gonna put a proposal together to go to the ORC, then to come back to the planning board, and then it'll go through its process with y'all. Public Works Director, he asked to have something amended for culverts, which was to allow the plastic versions to be used. So they're looking into that. I think just a simple denotion to what is required through Maine DOT, which allows it to happen. So like in our ordinance, it states it, and if you look at that reference, it allows it, but then it contradicts itself further down in our ordinance. So I think there's some simple cleanup that we can do. And then our entrance grade requirement in our ordinance on Route 1 and 90 contradict what MDOT requirement is. So what we'll find is an applicant already has MDOT permit approval, and then the planning board says, well, that grade doesn't match what we say it has to match, but they've already got permit approval from MDOT. So what do we do? So they're looking into that. But that's ORC's agenda for this, I guess, for the June ballot. This is what they're going to try to have together for you all to approve for a June ballot.
So at the top of this, it says approved by select board on December 13, 2021. Is that,
Oh, sorry, I didn't remove that.
okay?
That was, this is literally the work plan that you did approve, and
Yeah.
I just amended a few things.
Okay,
So some of this you've already approved, and then there's amendments into it, so.
okay, but we'll just
Outside of that.
wholesale approve this now.
Do we have a motion?
I move the board approve the ORC work plan as presented.
Okay.
All those in favor? 4-0. Let me do my little housekeeping here. The next action item is for committee appointments for Jeff Parker for the Budget Committee and Lynn Rudder for alternate Parks and Beautification Committee. Are we happy not having Jeff come up and talk to us, or would we rather have him stay?
He's just gonna edit everything.
He's like, no.
He'll edit it over. He'll dub over what he wanted to say. So that's no. And
Move the board appoint Jeff Parker to the Budget Committee to fill the vacancy created by Jared Cronkite's resignation, with Parker's term ending in June 2023, when this committee's seats remaining tenure will be up for election.
Second. And all those in favor? 4-0. Again, bear with me while I do my housekeeping. And Lynn Rudder. Would you care to come up and tell us a little bit about yourself?
You need to come up to the
Yeah,
mic,
just
because the
up to the, yeah, and it,
live
you know,
stream
we,
can't hear you.
we've got all the
That's your application.
nuts and bolts of stuff, but for those that
Do
don't
I
know you
talk
or
now?
can't see you.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Lynn Rudder, and we moved to Rockport in 2016. And I have 2 degrees in education and environmental education, and a great passion for working with young children in the out of doors. And that includes native plants and beautiful settings and pristine environments. And I've been very engaged in Rockport since I moved here with the Conservation Committee, the Garden Club, and the Stewardship Education Alliance, which is C. and that's 7 towns that we encompass. But I've really seen a change of invasive plants coming, kind of traveling up, and it's a brand-new landscape, environmental concern, because they really outcompete and outcolonize plants, and it's something to, I think, take pretty seriously because it affects biodiversity with insects and other wildlife. And if the insects don't have host plants, then you have a whole chain of the birds don't have insects to eat, and insects are in quite a decline. So, and then because they wipe out the biodiversity of plants, well, I guess I've said that, it affects everything. So I will be really strong in wanting to see native plant gardens.
Thank
Well, I
you.
think the Parks Committee is very excited to have Lynn join.
No, you're very fortunate. I was, again, reading over some of the
Yeah.
accomplishments.
And since you're saying everything that hits every one of my key points that I keep commenting on, right?
You got Eric's vote.
That's right, Eric.
With the native plants and pollinators and reduction of invasive species, including excess grasses. Lawns.
Do you have a motion?
I move the board appoint Lynn Rutter to the,
A neighbor who said, oh, you have to go talk to John Duke about the lawn at the library, and I'm like, wrong person.
we'll have all our cemeteries and good native plants. There you go. Yes. I move the board appoint Lynn Rutter to the alternate member position for the Parks and Beautification Committee with a term ending in June 2025.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All those in favor? Okay, 4-0. Thank you, Lynn. And
Call anytime.
it, it's, as you know, a rowdy group, so.
Big group.
And action item C is act on the general assistance ordinance and appendices. John,
So we've done you've done the law portion of this. We've done connected to the public hearing. This is merely the formal adoption of these maximums, which, for those who are unfamiliar, this is every year. These are updated to reflect costs and the actual, the expected costs of what it should be to house, clothe, feed, heat. And, but when you look at these maximums, this is not a reality that anybody can live in 2022. But
But that, we don't have control over
that's
that.
not a law that we can change. We really can try to adopt this and have something as close to what the law allows as possible.
and regardless of what we spend, we will spend it, and we'll be reimbursed
Get reimbursed.
70%.
Bingo. Yep.
I move the board adopt the 2022 general assistance maximums for Knox County as presented.
Second.
All those in favor? 4-0. And
As much as I don't like it.
action item D, act on the school warrant.
So very quickly, this was, the school had to return for an amended approval of its budget from last June. There were some errors. Eric, I think they could have used you on that one. But in any
I
event.
mean, actually read the numbers.
Yeah, well, new finance director and administration came in and met, and they have subsequently met last Friday night. There was there was what effectively in our sort of language is a special town meeting to adopt this revised language. We are then obligated effectively to just create a warrant. And good news, the ballots are here today. So for those of you who have absentee ballots, they'll be in the mail anytime, and you can come in the town office and vote as well. So once you take action on here, we're off to the polls. That's it.
Move the
And-
board approve the school warrant as presented.
Second, yeah. Either one.
All those in favor? 4-0. And action item E. Act on the peddler's permit extension for native sauna. It appears as if you'd like to have an extension from what was originally October 31st. And I think, wasn't the original request that you were looking for like mid-October and we couldn't decide on it, so we said, let's bump it to the end of the
Well-
month, and now you're looking to go to March 31st?
So, yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think it was kind of more like we had decided at the last meeting that we would just like kind of see how it went, and that we would reevaluate things at the end of October. So yeah, it's going well down there, and we certainly would like the extension. We've had a lot of interest. Our numbers kind of don't really reflect the amount of interest that we've had, and I think that's really just because September was pretty warm, and it's a really new concept for people to kind of wrap their head around. And so I've had a ton of people coming by being like, yeah, I really want to do this, I really want to use this, but it was still, it's still early days, we're still getting the word out. And so I sort of am realizing that for the community, people want to use this service on the weekends more, when they have time more, and most people work, who are going to be using this. So, a lot of people are working like 9-to-5 jobs or something like that, and it's really not an option for them except for on the weekends. And so, so we would like that extension through the winter as the park quiets down. And then also it would be really great if we could have an extension with the hours as well. Part of the application says that we need to be wrapped up an hour before sunset. And so, as we get closer to the end of the year, sunset is going to be around like 3:30 around the winter solstice. So it just doesn't really give people much opportunity to use the service. If we could extend that, just a little bit later into the evening, and not, it's not something that I want to do every day. Like, we have 2 little kids. I don't want to be in the park, at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. But at the same time, it would be nice to offer the service to, like, for example, I had a dad come by one day. It was the first weekend we were out there, and he was like, oh, wow, this is really great. I would love to use this. What are your hours? And I said, well, these are the hours. And we kind of, 4 o'clock, I think, is like our last one. And he's like, oh, well, this is like not something I'm ever going to be able to use, because I work out on Vinyl Haven and I don't get off the ferry until 5:15. And I have 4 kids, and my wife works on the weekends. And so I'm on the kids, for the weekend. And so, it's kind of for people like that, and other, the vast majority of other people who work during the day, during the week, so they can use it on the weekends. Or if we could offer, I kind of feel like, it seems like end of the week is where people want to be down there. So Thursday, Friday, maybe we can have a 5 o'clock session and a 6:30 session, and, or something like that. I don't want to be there, past 7:30, 8 o'clock. So that's sort of what I'm thinking. It would be really nice if we could do that, if we could offer that service.
Any questions from the board?
Well, I don't have questions specifically of
I have a list
Katie
of
and Josh,
concerns.
but I've
Okay.
gotten a lot of negative feedback on the sauna, nothing to do with how you guys are operating or anything. It's more on a policy level. What are we doing with our park, and why do we have a business? I mean, what sort of, I guess it really just fundamentally goes to how we, as a town, use our parks. And so I've gotten a lot of feedback from people who are pretty upset at our park being sort of, again, it's, you guys, it's a cute little thing, and it's, but there are just people who feel like a park is a park, and it's not a place for businesses. The food truck that's there, was sort of deemed, I think, having a food truck there sort of added value to the people who were down there visiting.
But that in itself, and we're sort of getting into the conversation.
Yeah, and I
part
don't
of it,
want to,
but-
because it isn't a question, I don't think, it's a bigger question.
Right,
It has
I
nothing
think
to do
part
with
of
the
our
sauna.
problem is we have not yet developed a policy for the use of the park, whether it's a food truck, a sauna, or any other type of commercial purpose. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed, come the first of the year. Actually, you could start it now and have a policy ready for us to adopt, so it can be used by the first of the year when people do come and want to utilize our area. I mean, even the boom trucks, for setting masts. I mean, is it the best place to have it on the lawn down there next to the edge of the seawall, or can they do it, from the lobsterman side of things where they're not,
It's coming up in the work plan of the harbor committee.
yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of things.
and-
See, and that makes sense
Yeah.
for the harbor committee to
We've
be,
already discussed it,
okay.
or they've discussed it, and I threw my input in, so.
Perfect.
Yeah, so,
My only concerns there, besides some of what Denise is saying with, there's been a little bit of negative feedback about the policy of what we're doing there, would be more is the question of, well, we don't have a harbor master there during the winter, so we have no town staff there, we don't have any real security of what's going on. Is there space to do this when we're plowing snow, or does that just kind of get overrun? I have no idea.
Yeah.
Is there a space to put it then? If, I know we could probably put it closer to the building rather than over here on the side, obviously, but I mean, those are valid issues. We want to make sure if we're going to do this, that you have a safe environment to do it in, that you have a place that you can actually do it in, that people can still get to. I mean, how well do we maintain that little road to the harbor? Does it get slippery and icy, or is this going to be a concern trying to tow that in and out of there? I mean, that's not the easiest road to maneuver, and on a good day, let alone snowy and icy. I mean, so I'm not saying this is a bad idea. I'm just saying these are valid issues I would have, because I would never want to say, oh, this is, let's not support business, because I'm always saying we need to support more business. So, I mean, that really goes to what you think about that, because I can't make a decision without knowing those facts. And
well,
should
most of the grass is taken up by floats.
yeah,
It's
right.
the
That's
So
what I
we
was
would
gonna
have to
say.
move you.
Yeah,
And is this not something that the harbor committee should weigh in on
I think both
over
parks and harbor.
over the period? I mean, I don't want to just say yes and then have Abby say, "Oh, that's a horrible idea," because there's nobody there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my main concern,
Yeah,
is we
yeah.
don't staff that in the winter.
Isn't there gonna be anybody there this winter?
No,
TBD.
probably not.
Right. TBD.
Just me getting ready.
I know. Well, we all are, but you're no. I think you're absolutely right, Eric. I mean, this is, and I think all of you've sort of talked about this. I think it's something that Abby and I have discussed pretty often, and as you said, the Harbor Committee's already started that conversation. It's wonderful. Everybody loves our harbor. Unfortunately, everybody is now a lot bigger than it used to be. When everybody was just the people in Camden Rockport that knew where to go, it was wonderful. Now it's kind of outsized. So, I think that it's wise to say we need to do some policy work here to make sure the types of businesses, the spaces, the organization of it. I mean, this is still a relatively new phenomenon in Rockport to have peddlers at the harbor.
No, it isn't.
Relatively.
I mean,
Relatively.
25 years ago, your mother was selling stuff on the other side of the harbor.
10.
No, yeah, I know.
10 years.
Making it
I
sound
got
too
the
old.
receipts.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's they were good hot dogs. Just saying, I think the maybe the policy is behind where the work is, right? And we need time to, I think, maybe get those in place. I don't know. You would have a better sense of it, probably, Eric, than I would in terms of how ready those harbor rules are ready to move forward. And then the other question is, are they harbor, or are there others who?
Well, I think the Parks
Well,
Committee should
we keep
be-
running into that issue. Is it,
Yeah.
we keep saying, okay, well, that comes up almost every meeting. Is this harbor or is it park? And then who's oversee is it? Because, then Abby says, well, I take care of that. So
Right.
we still have never made that valid
Right.
determination. Is whose responsibility and under which committee does
Right.
that park fall? So there's always gonna be that contention there unless
Yes.
we actually make that
So-
set.
Well, it doesn't have to be either or, but there might just be
Yeah,
input.
yeah, I think we need to have a liaison type
Yeah.
community
Joint
cross.
meeting?
Yeah, joint meeting to set that. I don't know. But if we didn't do it at the harbor, is there another location that they could set up? Like, do we have another option, like the park across the street or something that's more plowable? I guess. I mean, that's
Yeah.
really my concern. I don't want to
Yeah.
get you down in there and then say, oh,
Well,
I have
we
a
just don't
snowstorm and you get stuck. Because
There's not a lot of space in the park once all the floats
Yeah.
are out. It's pretty,
yeah, and that's the other thing is it once they pull all everything out, there's
Parallel to the grass, like where the larger parking area is where it hits the wharf, where the food truck was. If the sauna was parallel to that, you could plow in front of it. It would be on the grass, and all of the floats would be behind.
I have bigger concerns than just plowing though, and it's based on what I'm hearing from residents. They really want to know that we're giving this some thought and we're not just, again, I think you guys, it isn't picking on you at all. It's just, we have decisions. This is a community space. And we sort of okayed it for 2 months. That's what I told everybody. I said, don't worry, it's just a little period of time. But now that we're talking about a longer period of time, I think we have to back up and really consider what Harbor Park is to our residents and for our town.
we don't really have a I mean,
Well, I've heard negative. I,
You've heard.
yes, I mean, what are you doing with the sound down there?
yeah, I've had it a
We're going
couple
to put one
comments.
down there, and we don't have anything that says we can, so we gave
You said yes.
permission to do it, so, that's the problem I have, I think, I'd hate to sit in and give you permission to put it down there until next spring, and all of a sudden, in the meantime, we come up with a policy, and I think, we need to come up with a policy, obviously, and see just exactly what we want that park to look like, and what we want down there. Going from food trucks to anything.
Yeah.
I guess the reason why we felt like the harbor was such a great spot for us through the winter is because it really gets pretty quiet in the winter.
Yeah.
There's not really a lot going on down there. It's not like, you can sit outside in 6-degree weather for most people and really enjoy that view. There's not a lot of tourists coming through. There's no tourist buses coming through. It's really quiet. And so because of that, we thought that it would be a good location. The facilities are there and, it's a pretty central location with a really beautiful view.
It's a knock your
Yeah.
socks off place for a business to be able to put its business.
Oh, for
but
sure. Yeah.
I think
But
we
even
just have
just
a
as-
higher level of consideration to
Yeah,
decide.
yep.
What if
I
we
feel ya.
say extend it by like till the end of November with the anticipation that we bring it to the Harbor Committee and Parks Committee for their input before deciding any further?
Well, our next meeting is November,
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know when the meetings fall.
14th.
14th.
That would be after our,
I mean, people are not happy about it.
well, I'm just,
And it's
I'm
not-
just looking for
again, it's
options,
just,
know.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
So I
don't
don't
want to
wanna
step on anyone.
Give anybody's hope, keep anybody's hopes up. that
Right.
We're gonna approve it, because I feel like it's a,
I mean, we're still good through the end of October, and I should probably have a Harbor Committee meeting
Yeah,
the third Wednesday
Yeah.
next week. I mean, I can bring it up there.
Yeah. Abby and I are meeting this week as well. to
Well,
talk
then you
about
can,
that.
you can mention it
So,
to her to add to
yeah.
the, make sure Sam adds it to the agenda.
Yeah. I think that there is a bigger conversation here that, she and I, we sort of circled, there's 3 spots you could put something,
Yeah.
you could go here, should there not be almost, this is where you are, this is the dates, sort of almost a calendar of those locations. And then, again, thinking more summer than winter, what is the impact in terms of parking? What is the impact in terms of trash pickup? And again, not really a sauna issue, but again, these bigger concerns, I think these are all things, whether it's parks and beautification or it's harbor, it's a conversation that,
Well, and we cut down
It's happening.
the number of weddings, which cut into our revenue as a town, because we wanted to keep that park available and open to the public. And I recognize that the trailer's smaller than a tent for a wedding. But I do think, I mean, we're getting no revenue really from this, right? Are we?
Yeah, we've
Oh,
got
you
a
are
$5
paying.
fee that we're gonna donate to the, we haven't given it yet, but.
We allocate it.
But,
It's in our.
and that really, we don't want to turn the park into like it's not there. It's for the residents of our town. It's not like
Exactly.
trying to
That's
sell.
what it is.
Yeah.
But-
As well, since you've been there, how many permit applications have you submitted, right? 4 for buildings? Additional throughout the town?
Oh, building permits is in
For,
like
for,
backyards.
yeah, for backyard saunas.
There's one other applicant that I'm gonna
Mhm.
meet with, but I've got one in Rockport up on Ministerial Road. And the other two
So-
are out of town.
I mean, just from the advertising standpoint, like word's getting around, people want one. So they're from a revenue standpoint, they're going through the application process with a permit to build one in their backyard.
Uh-huh.
So that's an additional revenue side.
Which
To-
sounds good, but then again, it comes back to.
I'm just adding that in.
Right, I agree. Anything that increases, as long as it's good for the town to help
Yep.
increase the revenue, I'm all happy for that.
Yep.
But it comes back to the point of, is this a business or is it an advertisement? Or,
Sure.
it comes back to the concerns that we've been hearing. So I'd rather table this personally until after I can meet with the Harbor Committee.
I think we have to.
Only because I feel like it needs a broader way in, and I'd really like to get the harbor master's opinion as to how she would feel about this sitting there all winter. Nothing, I mean, that's me.
I absolutely welcome that because Abby's been completely supportive.
Right, I know, she is. I just feel I can't make a decision without.
that's-
So,
Fair
Hearing from
and
her.
reasonable, and we totally understand that.
so what I think I'm hearing said, Eric, is to table it until the 14th? And do we allow them to continue past the 31st to the 14th as sort of a,
My concern is, and maybe I'm gonna be 1 out of 5, but based on what I'm hearing from residents, they're not supportive of having this sauna down in the
Well-
park. And even if Abby is, which is great, and maybe you need to find people who come in and say, oh my gosh, what better use for our park than to have a sauna there? But I'm not hearing anything like that. I'm only hearing people who think we've like sold our park out, and I didn't tell them we're not really getting very much money anyway. So that's,
I agree with you.
How would you like that information presented?
well, I mean, I think that's up to you guys. I'm just telling you what I've heard more negative comments about this sauna than anything else we've done as a select board.
well,
Which isn't saying much. I mean, people are pretty quiet, but
Yeah.
when this showed up, people were like, wow, this is, I mean, it's just, it generated,
I mean, you don't expect to see that.
yeah, it's different. And again, it's not a criticism, it's not because the trailer is ugly but so I just don't want to,
so we haven't had any input from the Harbor Committee. I mean, and we haven't had, other than verbally from Abby the other day, I mean, do we know what type of impacts it's caused since it's been here that she might be able to weigh in on? I mean, I'm still of a mind that we need to have a policy in the bigger picture.
yeah. that's
It
the
needs to
thing.
cover everything.
Yeah.
And do
But
we
I'm
have
also of a
businesses
mind to
down there?
be moderately fair and give the extension until the 14th to see what the other input is from the harbor and more input from Abby, and then a decision can be made. I mean, we're talking 2 weeks. I know it's not gonna be,
Yeah, I
the
just
end
don't
of-
want to create the impression that the answer is going to be yes at the end.
no, I mean, but it does allow for 2 more weeks of opportunity for you to come back and I've had 150 people down here or whatever, to give us a bit more of an update as to your successes. So that's sort of a direction that, I mean, I'm trying to be
It's
And I-
tricky,
and-
and we, you guys are great, you've been very,
Any online comments?
No, I don't have any. but-
Anybody online?
No.
That's,
Well, the online, it's a little different than the old system
Yeah, I know.
was. So it doesn't quite, but.
I know, just curious.
Usually I get the emails in the middle.
Are we not the topic?
absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah.
oh, absolutely.
I'll just say, I know quite a swimming community in Rockport, and I think it's based on health. And from what I know about saunas, is that they extend your life quite a bit. So I think the perspective that it's a health service, I don't know if you would be open to it being somewhat of a community service sometimes for people to try or whatever. I was at the harbor every single day this summer, plus I go to 2 yoga classes down there. And not that we're gonna change this, but the biggest impact down there are those trucks that transport boats up and down and sit there and idle. And I had kids right at those picnic tables with the boat club. But those trucks that stay in one place and idle and go. So for someone that spent every single day down there this summer, I would say it didn't have any impacts, I'll just say it's a health thing, and I think it's a welcome thing to Rockport.
Okay. So I guess the question is, do we extend it to our next select board meeting?
Well,
Hey, do you wanna make a motion?
I'd move we table it until the 14th of November, and then allow more input from the Harbor Committee and any impact notes that Abby may have from, vehicle issues to anything else. I mean, but we
So will
do,
the input from the Harbor Committee be a policy as to how we're gonna use Harbor Park, or will it be
No, I'm
input
just-
based on this particular?
I'm just thinking if we at least get their input of how they feel about this.
I mean, frankly-
Extension, but,
We should have
and maybe
clause.
help them,
We need a
Oh, Frank-
policy.
yeah, we do, and there are policies, sorry, Mark, that are coming into play regarding, where they're putting the boom truck and all this other stuff.
I-
So,
and frankly, I almost asked that question when we were granting them their permit last time, whether we'd heard from the Harbor Committee. Didn't, silly me.
Yeah, I didn't ask enough
Yeah.
questions at the time.
they,
too.
Abby was fine with it at the time, and
It's-
but again, my concerns still are, we're not usually manned 100% in the winter, and if it's on the weekend and we're doing the other thing, then there's gonna be nobody there to oversee the park at the time, and how does that impact our insurance or policies or
And doesn't all the
liabilities
water
or?
get turned off there?
I was gonna say, and the facilities won't be open in the wintertime
Yeah, the
anyway.
water will be on outside, but I think,
You have external water tanks anyway, right? Oh, you
Well,
don't?
we don't. We also don't need water, though.
Oh, you don't?
No.
Oh, okay.
We don't need water. We don't need electricity. We don't need anything.
Yeah, I didn't
really.
think so, right.
It's a location.
So I move we would table it until the 14th of November. Further input from the Harbor Committee and Abby, pros and cons from her.
Second?
And a policy to be developed?
Well,
Is
and,
that-
right, and that's something we'll, after we vote on this, we can direct.
Okay,
Right,
To
because
start.
they're discussing that, so if you have the meeting, you can add her to, ask her to add that. Yeah.
And, it's not the best of circumstances, but it's a couple more weeks for more input,
Yeah.
and who knows what'll happen between now and then. So,
No, we appreciate the consideration and the extension, absolutely. And we fully understand, where you're coming from, and certainly that you
Our-
need to have a policy for
our
it.
biggest concern, I think, is, we're starting to see people that want to utilize the harbor, and we don't really have anything in place to help regulate it. So, until we get something in place, God only knows what we could have for people wanting to use it for whatever reasons. And we'd want to have something that says, oh, no, sorry.
Yeah.
You don't
Fair
fit,
enough.
you don't fit the, So, all those in favor of tabling it to the 14th? 4-0.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Again,
guys.
I do appreciate it.
Yeah.
That, just to be clear, that means we can't go back there until we come to the meeting on the 14th, or we can operate.
You can operate
Operate
through.
until-
Continue it through the 14th.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Go back here or invite the evening, just be.
John,
Yeah. What? Yes?
well, I guess no.
Is there a question, or-
They'd have to come back to get a vote of
Yeah.
the board to have it
Yeah, you'd
extended.
yeah.
You'd have to come
Yeah.
to the next meeting.
Because we're basically tabling, other
Yeah,
than
we're,
giving you a.
you know, instead of doing this now, we're gonna
November.
review it
14-day
at our next
extension.
meeting after
October,
we
isn't it?
confer with our committees.
You don't have to submit a new application,
No,
so that's one good thing.
no,
And then, but secondly, we have work to do internally to sort of get ourselves in the right mind space where we can say, okay, this is where it fits. And this, again, as everyone has said here, this is sort of independent of almost of what you're trying to accomplish
Sure.
there. It just, this was already sort of on my mind as something that needed to be tackled this winter anyway. Unfortunately, you're sort of in the middle of that conversation, but it's needed, and hopefully it will provide the clarity so that any prospective business, can know. As Mark said, I'm in, I'm not in,
well, and it may be something as simple as our policy says, all of these type of activities
Yep.
happen on the fisherman's side of
Could be.
the landing.
Right.
And that's as simple, everybody goes, but they're not, I don't want to say cluttering up, but they're not tying up a lot of place. I mean, I have sat down there on the fisherman's side of things, having my lunch,
Yep.
and the amount of activity and cars that are parking in the circle when there's not, a food truck there, and they're double stacking, because, and this is a time, there were 2 boats being pulled out the other day.
Jeez,
So, there's a lot of thought that needs to be given to this.
you're right. Yeah.
And, did you put that in your notes to have that ready for us by the,
Well, I've already kicked this to them, so this is, yeah, okay, we got it. I mean, this is the Harbor Committee. I'm hoping the Harbor Committee is gonna have the heft here, but we'll get it. We'll get it. We got it.
perfect.
It'll be great.
All right. Thank you
See you
very
on the
much.
14th.
Thanks a lot.
Action item F, act on Tricia Dixon and Sally Cook to move from alternative to regular members on the Parks and Beautification Committee.
I move the board approve to appoint Sally Cook and
Thank you.
Tricia Dixon as regular members to the Parks and Beautification Committee.
Second?
All those in favor? 4-0.
Is that filling in, backfilling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, we've already had our discussion of the EMS and discussion of utility easement authorization, potentially for a special town meeting.
Yes.
And this is discussion item B.
Excuse me. All choked up over it.
Thank you.
The way to start.
Please,
Try.
because, I'm gonna, yeah, no, go ahead.
Sure. Okay.
yeah.
I don't. Okay. It's not uncommon in many municipalities that you'll receive applications for pole placements or guy wires on utility. That's kind of common practice. You see it all the time. And also other main municipalities, it's not uncommon to see utility easements. We were approached by a property owner who was who was working with CMP, and through that require an easement on town property for the installation of a vault, because through an attempt to try to bury some lines and install underground lines and so forth. And so through that conversation, okay, we'll check it. Ryan and I met. We met with or spoke with our town attorney, Phil Saucier, and Phil, his review of our ordinance said that unlike most main municipalities, this board lacks the authority to issue those easements. Again, pole placement, yes. Utility easement, no. And so usually this would have been something I would have, okay, put on the agenda and we'll, but a little bit more complicated than that. So, again, talking with him on Friday, his advice and recommendation was that the board could pursue a special town meeting. I would hope not a referendum style because of the costs entailed in that. But you could pursue a special town meeting with the simple, very straightforward language to say that the town, effectively the same language that you use in your existing town meeting warrant to handle boundary line disputes. We have that already. Effectively, we'd be working off of that to allow the town, the select board, to issue easements, it's utility easements on town property. So that would, and then from there, just like any other easement, pole placement, or what have you, you'd have the right and the authority to determine whether or not those would be granted or not. So that's it. I mean, that's pretty much,
Okay, I think that makes sense.
that's what it is. Yeah.
So in doing this, there'll be no cost incurred by the town?
If we do a special town meeting in person, no cost. If we did a referendum style, yeah. Because we'd have to have you'd have to set how long you wanted to have the polls open
Yeah.
and
No, I think,
all that, so that stuff.
It's not, it doesn't seem like something that requires that.
I think,
So what have we done in the past when this has come up? It's never happened?
I mean,
probably didn't know we didn't have the
Sorry.
authority.
the only person who's more new than not me is Orion, so,
know, right?
but I, in other communities, we've issued those easements, so it was sort of, yeah, okay, the board, yep, oh, what road is it on? And you're done.
So what time frame would you be looking to have it? I mean, at the earliest would be your November meeting.
You can set a special town meeting at least 8 days from now. So anything more than 8 days from now is the soonest, and the end of time on the other side of it. So it's really a question of, would you want to match that up with your next meeting on the 14th? You could do that.
Have it on the 14th.
You
then?
could. You could start at 5:30 if you wanted to, for that part, and be done with it, or you could do it at 6, frankly, if it's that small of an issue.
That would make sense.
Whichever's,
Well, let's just do that.
Well, I'm just thinking of tying up one day,
simple.
I mean,
One half an hour.
I mean, I have, my feeling would be if it's not that pressing,
Yeah.
how pressing of an issue is this? Is this something
I
that?
was waiting to get it done.
Yeah, well, it would involve cuts in the road, so, you're, paving and all that, you're going across town property, so you're going across the town road, so then, there's that aspect to it. And if you go too late, then paving plants are closed and
Well, I think
So it's November 14th, too late.
well, I think that's,
tight.
well, I
Really
think the
tight.
15th is what the state has for a cutoff for paving. I'm not
Yeah.
100% sure of that.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that we couldn't do something.
Yeah.
Patch job or something.
Would they want us to do it sooner?
I explained the situation to CMP and,
I can't imagine that this just cropped up. I mean, how long has this been
uh,
percolating that we might not have talked about it tonight?
well, I got the map on Friday, so just to give you an idea, I mean, this
Well,
was, you and I talked, I think 11:30, and they came in at 12, so.
Well, you see, this is another one of my
Yeah.
little bugaboos about, it's always been that, I don't know how Michelle's done it.
Yeah.
I know how other chairs have done it.
Yeah.
Usually Wednesday is the day when
Sure.
things are finalized. And then for whatever reason, we had pushed it out to Friday. We had talked.
Well, we
And I-
added a lot of items
and I-
after Wednesday to the agenda too. That
And I-
was, so we were just trying to get all that together.
And
you know?
I had looked after I'd gotten home and I said, well, I don't remember talking about that
Yeah.
one. So here we are talking about it.
We sure are, yeah. And if you say no, you say no. I mean, you have every right to
No,
go
my
through
only
that.
worry is if we do it November 14th, doesn't matter to them, that then they're effectively pushed out till the spring.
I've explained the schedule that potentially, like I said, 8 days from the end of time, and their understanding of our limitations. So I think it's more a question of what are you comfortable with in terms of making a decision on this?
So
you
what
know?
is this
That isn't
holding
just
up?
gonna happen overnight, I can tell you that.
Yeah, well, what is it holding up, though?
The work that they
Is it a
need.
construction
Yeah,
project that we're
Yeah, it's a
looking at?
construction project, so they're working and I mean, there's,
You're talking,
Just
So
down the
maybe
street.
it's too late
Yeah, there's-
anyway.
right.
well,
There's some work on private property that has to happen
no,
before we even get to the town property,
if we
so,
could,
but
if he could get across.
I think the issue is, what sort of timetable do we want to talk, you know,
Impact
does the
road.
town want to set forth as sort of a
That.
benchmark
Okay, what
for
happens behind
the
his face,
conversation? If it's no on the
That'll
14th,
happen.
it could be a no on the 14th, right? Because there's always that sort of, anytime you go before a town meeting, you never know how it could end up, right? So,
On something as exciting as giving us authority to grant a utility easement. This
I
is
know,
barn
but pretty powerful stuff.
Well, my only worry is that that's maybe, why not, if we can do it as quickly, and since we're only meeting once a month, I mean, a lot of select boards meet twice a month.
We always used to.
Yeah, and so we have that other sort of reserved. So could we
could.
do it for that?
Could.
Take a half an hour or whatever it takes.
Day are we looking?
Any day.
It was the 10th, so the 24th?
Yeah, that'd be 24th.
Oh, that's some kind of holiday, Diwali.
Diwali, yeah.
The 24th is good. I don't have anything scheduled in the evening.
Okay. 6 o'clock, is that a good time for?
Yeah, yeah, not before.
24th, 6th.
Well, I'm still waiting for a motion. You know,
It's her job.
I'm looking to my left.
Oh,
you're
oh,
looking
my
to your
motion.
right. Oh,
Do we have to do a motion as a discussion item? I move that we set a special town meeting for October 24th. Let's see, to ask the question whether the select board can have the authority to approve utility easements on town property.
Second.
so,
and you know, and now that we're having the conversation portion of this program, I mean, I still think that, you know, at the point in time where we are now, this just cropping up, I mean, sure, it should have been thought about, you know, ages ago. And, you know, I understand the purpose of it. And I think it will make a little portion of that area better by not having, you know, the above-ground wires.
Well, didn't I read something in one of the Main Street beautification programs there, they were talking about trying to go buried through town, bury all the utilities. I thought I read that.
yeah.
That was gonna be one of the pet projects.
It's the best thing you can do for climate change is if you could get all your utilities buried so you wouldn't run out of your power
Like
with
that
every storm.
cost is,
Oh, yeah, but when somebody's
out of sight.
willing to do it.
yeah. Oh, we need Sandy Lewis back in town.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for those that don't know. Yeah.
Did I say that? Maybe a lot of people don't want him back.
And I would second that. So we'll have all the pertinent, information. I mean,
Yeah.
because right now we have nothing.
Well, right, so what it would be the framing of this, and I'll get it from Phil tomorrow, would be, to see if, you know, the framing of that question, the same sort of format that we're talking about for your,
Location, purpose,
oh, no,
No,
not,
we're just gonna have authority to approve them.
and then on
The
your,
second question is, I mean, not, anyway.
the question during your meeting would be, do you actually want to issue this easement in question? So you could say, I want the authority, town, but I don't agree with that particular application. You could say that too. So there's it's a, you know, it's really just asking the question, do you even want to be able to ask or answer that question? Yeah.
So the time of the time of this is at what time?
6
Did-
p.m.
Did you add that into that?
Yeah, she did.
All right. Make sure my notes, you know,
We'll hear about it if not, so.
yeah.
I'm gonna call for a vote then.
All those in favor? 4-0. Discussion item C is just a conversation of thanking our deputy harbor master for their summer work.
They were great. These were-
And the other thing I would add is Drew and Rob are, well, they both are gone for the season. If things break, and they can,
Thanks for coming. See you guys.
good night, Gosses. Good to see you.
Thanks.
If things break and we have our traditional storm in late October, early November, both are willing and able to come back and help us out and kind of keep things together, which is one of my big fears following the storm last year. Sort of Abby was on her own with a lot of volunteers out there, and we've got guys who are trained and know their stuff, and so it's great to have both available and around to help out. So, great.
So you're going to, again, provide some sort of documentation for them for their, I don't know how that's been, I don't recall that having been done in the past.
Like as for those
For
who
us.
part-time labor, you mean?
Right, I don't remember us doing it last year.
Did they? The harbor committee has something planned.
Okay.
Oh, good.
I
Maybe
don't know
we-
if it happened yet. It should have.
yeah.
We won't. I'll say less. That sounds good.
Yeah.
We'll take a couple of minute break until the Honorable Mr. Annis gets back, so we can go on to the next item, which is discussion of the Route 90 sewer project.
Sounds
What
good.
about the traffic ordinance?
Traffic ordinance first.
Did I skip one?
You skipped one.
That wouldn't be all
I
bad.
can't imagine.
You want me?
Yes,
We
there you go.
have Jeff take a. Can we pause? Yeah.
give you my,
And apparently, we're back live. Thank you, Jeff. And, yeah, well, it was a well-deserved break. Thank you.
Needed. Now we can
Well needed.
hash out from D to N.
Okay. Discussion item number D for the traffic ordinance updates. These are things, John, that I told you that, you know, what Forrest had when I started should have been updated. So I'm more than certain that the whole kit and caboodle needs to be looked at, reviewed, and brought in for an approval.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. I've looked
Yep.
it over. It's
It's very rough.
It's traffic and park, it includes parking.
well,
too.
Right.
yeah, right, and that's the predominant, obviously, theme. And I think so. As I mentioned in my comments here, Chief Gagny and I have talked about this, and this is sort of one thing we've talked about when we're doing performance reviews. As a goal for him, is to get this done this winter. Obviously, enough time to then come back. Orion's been working on parking as well, so there's a lot of collaboration going on. But Randy, has wanted to take the first cut, and there's there's a lot of history in the existing ordinance that goes back decades. Like I said, it goes back, with Forrest was still here. So there's kind of two parts to this conversation. The one part is that. The second part is the 1790 intersection concerns that I've continued to hear, and somebody came in last week, concerns about that. Again, talked with Phil. We had a long talk on Friday, our town attorney, and he has a draft that he started. It's not ready to share with me, but he's working on that, and I expect we'll have that for your November meeting. The one thing he did say out of that is he's aiming for something more of a license than an outright prohibition, because then that allows you to pick and choose. And some entities, like perhaps your fire department, might be ones that you'd want to allow to work in that area, whereas groups that are a little bit more harder to pin down, perhaps like those who are out there currently with the shirts and dancing around or whatever it is they're doing, maybe a little less so. But that's for you, just your decision at that time.
This is on the panhandling.
Yes, that's the panhandling. So they can make a decision at that point. But and actually, Dan Murphy, our litigator, who's working with us on all these lawsuits that we've unfortunately been dealing with. He actually is a bit of an expert on this matter, so he's working with Phil on this as well to make sure we're not running afoul of
So is there any,
those issues.
are there any issues between a state road and a municipal road?
yeah, that was my question.
No, we can regulate.
We can regulate the state road. All right. So, and I'm going to try to tie everybody into a time frame.
Yep.
So this will need to go, because of an ordinance, it will need to go for an ordinance change?
Well, that was the one thing that. So usually with parking ordinances, that's an action that's taken on that's you can do without requiring a full vote of
'Cause it's
the
not
The
citizens.
townspeople.
Right. Phil's belief that with this added section, either it's a separate ordinance or it's built in. He hasn't really figured out what the mechanism is. And of course, Orion's got some things that he wants to work on as well. So I don't know if I quite know exactly what the final draft of this will look like until we have a few more pieces of the puzzle put together. But if it was purely parking, I'd like to think it'd be adopted by February, in your February
Well,
meeting. That would be my hope, because that gives us 2 months to order signs and paint and, whatever else it takes to sort of get ahead of those things. And then potentially if we have to put money in the budget, to deal with parking issues, we could.
But they seem like
Well-
two different issues too, though.
They do to me.
I
yeah.
mean, I don't see why one would restrict, we couldn't do the one and then put the other one on the, I realize the lawyers have to make that decision, but, I mean, if we already had a parking ordinance,
Yeah.
then we would only be talking about part two.
Yeah.
So, let's do one, and then we'll talk about part two.
Well, we do have one. It's just
Yeah, we're changing
it's
it.
mothballed.
Yeah.
It's you know.
Yeah, it's
so
not
we have to
valid.
change it, and we need we need some current day guidance from our
Right, I
our
get it.
PD chief. Our what's it?
So
Blue
let-
chief? Is that what you call him? Blue chief? Red chief? Blue chief? Like you? Yeah. So we need some guidance there, and like I said, Ryan's been involved in that, and
February 13th.
February 13th, is that the day?
That
Just
is your
before?
meeting. I was actually going to say March 13th.
No,
But,
February.
but February 13th, if you're comfortable with that,
Yeah.
I would expect that something will be,
That's our select board meeting.
Yep. and it doesn't, contrary to when it comes to parking enforcement, if we're not going to enforce what's currently on the books,
Yeah.
there shouldn't be any additional cost to hire somebody to come in and be your ticket officer.
I don't know.
These are all things that, even down at the harbor, I mean, Randy and I have had this conversation. We pay their ticket officer to come over and do our work because the people that are there, as Randy would say, I'd rather have a uniformed officer do it. That might be what he likes, but it's not necessary.
Right. I guess.
So,
Yeah, absolutely.
It just sort of irks me that we have to pay for somebody over there to come here and do the
Yeah.
work that we could do ourselves.
Do we get to keep
Absolutely.
parking ticket revenue?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the only money we get to
Unlike-
keep. The
unlike
state,
speeding.
Speeding.
state gets everything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So February 13th,
Sounds like it. Happy early Valentine's Day.
perfect.
So that's for both of those?
Yeah. Yeah. I think we could do both by then. I'd like to think we could have the second one by November. I realize, like you were saying, Eric, it would be better to have the opposite, but
Yeah.
I
Well,
think we're
whichever
just
way
further
it
ahead on
goes,
that.
it doesn't matter.
Wouldn't
Yeah.
that be part of your traffic ordinance?
it could be. That's
I mean, that would be bald,
Well,
I
but
mean,
weren't you
like-
saying that the panhandling one might have to go to the voters?
it may.
Right, which
Whereas
is
the
why I'm
parking
saying
ordinance
I'd
doesn't
rather
have to.
say, let's knock out the parking and then say, okay, we're done with that part. I don't really see the need to put them together unless the lawyer says, oh, because you're changing so much, you have to, but
Well, the only reason they're together is that ideally they're both parking and traffic ordinances, which means they can be done by this group anytime.
Oh, okay, well,
That's
that's
the
fine
only
then.
reason that there's a connection.
All right,
So
well,
the
that's fine.
panhandling
I
too,
was
they
just,
don't have to go to the
Well,
voters?
but that's why. But then Phil said maybe not. Maybe
Okay.
this should be something separate. So,
So-
We'll
just
let
to really
Phil-
made more confusion
That's
to
a
it.
100% answer.
if they,
We'll just
if
wait
they
for
don't-
further information.
if they don't need to go to the voters, we could expect to have them here February 13th.
Exactly.
If not, we'll have the parking traffic ordinance on the 13th, and then the voters will get the other one
in June.
in June.
Get that queued up.
Perfect.
There we go.
And now I'll go to the one that I skipped right to before.
Because it's the
So
exciting one.
excited.
Oh, it is an exciting one.
Yeah, it is.
Route 90 sewer project.
Yep.
And the reason I brought that up is I talked to Jonathan a little bit the other day, and we still have ARPA money that's available that hasn't been taken or utilized elsewhere. And, there's a potential that that could be used for some of the engineering costs. And I don't know what other grants or what other funds that Orion's been able to find. So let's sort of bring us up to speed where we are and what, any timeline that you have. I mean, do we anticipate,
My concern with using ARPA money is you're only benefiting sewer users.
well, the only thing you're using with broadband is those that want to use it. I mean, that's sort of
Maybe
a,
it's a similar thing,
that's a
yeah.
dumbed down type of, reply, but, I mean,
I would agree there.
your sewer extension is gonna allow infrastructure,
Economic development for the town.
economic development to, there's been advancement in another area that I don't think either one of us can talk about, but it's promising, for the other end of it. And there are some other things that, to me, I was just throwing it out there because it hasn't been yet grabbed, and if it could be, and if it could be beneficial for us to help pay for something that's gonna be a multi-million-dollar project, then so be it, so. But anyway, that's why I was trying to get some update from you guys as to what grant funding has been asked for, what's been received, you know, where are we in the dollars and cents sort of things.
You want to start? You start, because I've talked too much tonight.
Let's see where to begin on this. So we've got, so Megan worked on the Clean Water SRF fund, that loan forgiveness thing. That's, what was it, 1.8, almost 2 million?
2 million
And
almost.
we're ranked high on that, so we'll get that when we resubmit for it. The timing of everything didn't work out for this go round. We would have to have dedicated it, which we didn't have the timetables all spent up. So we'll be resubmitting for that, and we should, again, we ranked very high. We should receive that again. Knock on wood that I don't jinx us there. Governor Mills, she did grant and more does $1 million, which was an interesting award. Like, we were awarded it already, but she just flagged, you know, hey, look at what we just did. But it's an additional $1 million, so we have 2.8 million thus far towards this entire project. The Economic Development Administration, the EDA grant that I submitted, the biggest issue that they had with that was we didn't have our matching fund, which is this TIF district. That was the biggest component that they had. Great, cool, fun project. NBRC, same thing. Northern Border Regional Commission, same thing. Project looks cool, like what you're doing, but you don't have your matching fund yet, which is this TIF district. So November 10th, once we get the final count and if we get approval, essentially November 11th, I'm reaching out to the program managers of these grants, informing them we've got our approval. Now, what are these next steps that you need from me in this grant application so that you can see that we have our matching fund? And then that goes through its normal pace, committees review it, and it gets its determination made in a couple months. Now, the EDA has a new grant. Well, it's new-ish. It's a rolling grant. So as I submit it, the committee gets it, makes their determination. It's not a once a year, you know, they get all their applications in and they make their determination afterwards. So end of this year, we might know on the EDA aspect of it. MBRC, that might be next year. So depending on how we do this project, treatment facility, sewer extension, how we want to break that up, might determine how we handle the MBRC grant. But that'll be mid-November discussion.
And the bottom line dollar figure for the project, was that around 9 million?
For the sewer extension?
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so we're looking at potentially half of it being funded through grants.
So
Plus or
the
minus.
the three that's dedicated towards the treatment facility, it's kind of allocated to that.
Yep.
Yeah, but yes.
That's
Yeah,
the,
So that doesn't go towards the 9 million for the
right.
sewer extension.
Yeah, you would hope that the TIF proceeds will work to benefit the expansion of the sewer. Sort of one feeding the other, right? I mean, the biggest concern, and the one that, the biggest concern for me is where do we pump and treat our water? You know, so we can run it out Route 90, but then what?
what?
And so, you know, that conversation is something that's ongoing. You know, the meeting we had hoped to have with the town of Camden earlier this month was delayed due to some illness, and so that will be rescheduled for later this month, I believe, or early November. But beyond that, what is the long-term or our long-term options? City of Rockland, we're continue to talk to, and then also our own situation here, but it's all,
Well, so I guess that's where I'm going.
that's where it is.
It's just keeping us up to speed as to where we are. We know if we don't go there, we could go there, but we could build our own.
Right.
But, you know, the more up to speed that we can be kept,
Yeah.
the less effort it'll take for you guys to talk to us when the time
Sure.
comes.
Yeah.
So I guess that's part of
Yeah.
why I asked for that to be on there.
Okay.
You know, I'm
Good.
optimistic about the direction you guys are going.
The one thing I would say is, for me, and I'm probably, I feel the most conservative about this, because I don't want it to be something that we get too far over our skis on. And we need to make sure that whatever we do is, we want to expand economic development, but we don't want to do it to harm those who live here and work here and are paying their sewer bills already. And so
Well, we need to have an end result.
we have to have an end result.
Right.
That's it. Yeah. So,
And we also just need to keep working towards something to keep people that we're trying to talk with on their toes to talk to us. You know, because we can't just be led down the road.
yeah.
Anybody else have anything on that?
No.
Perfect. And the next one is a discussion of the RES site and the progress towards a June vote. And the reason I asked is because, as Jonathan and I talked the other day, the Economic Development Committee, there's been no movement with them for a couple of months. And Orion has alluded to some of the reasoning there. But, we just can't let this linger, and I think, the other question that we received the email on about, the potential sale of it.
Yep.
I mean, how does that all work? Because I think that, as we talked, I mean, there are things that, we can sell. And then there are things that we have to ask the voters on again, and this would be one of them.
So
So-
the EDC has a meeting,
They had a meeting this Thursday,
This
so
Thursday.
I was, if, can I go ahead and get
Yeah,
that up?
no, please.
So the last 2 months, the EDC had some complications on meetings, so they weren't able to. But one of those was still crunching the numbers on the pro forma with the 3 options that they've identified to look at, which was the New Height Group proposal, see how that financially works, less developed version, and then a park version of the sort. So kind of keeping with the same open vibe that's already there. And how's the economic viability of those 3 options? So that's what we're going to be discussing at this Thursday's meeting with the pro forma that I built on numbers that I have available to me. And then we'll kind of go from there. In the meantime, other members are reaching out to various business owners to get letters of support on, we need housing, I need commercial space, I need whatever. So that we have this information to take to that next step. So once we reach that conclusion phase of we need something, Economic Development Committee's making a recommendation, here's all this information and support, this is what we should do. And then we go for the next phase of finding a developer to build said lot.
So, the apple pie type of thing, is there any possibility that this could be ready for the voters to vote on in June?
Anything from the New High Group and the proposals I'm looking at, I don't think so. Mainly because of the numbers that I have at my disposal that I was able to figure out with New High Group on what it would really cost for square footage,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. Just a little sneak peek, none of it's really penciling, is the term that a lot of people like to use. It's not crunching for viability of the profitable aspect of it. So developer's not going to be particularly interested in these 3 options. The park aspect of it is just a park, so the money that's invested in it, if it's a municipality investing in it, then there's the upkeep portion of that. There's an economic benefit of it and the benefit of the surrounding area, but that's about it. Everything else, unless we sell all the housing units in year 1, it's kind of a tough pitch.
So,
And none of it is below 350 to 400,000
yeah,
per unit.
and that sort of, defeats the whole purpose of trying to develop some housing that is,
Right.
affordable for,
Right.
The non,
Because that's still just at or slightly below median, which doesn't help.
No. And I think the state of Maine dubs affordable housing at a little under 300,000. It's like
Right.
mid to high 200,000 for a
Yeah, it's
house.
30% of average
And so just-
median.
Yep.
Trying to get it to that is
Yeah, it's
is
gotta
hard.
be like 270-ish at the high end to be
so,
doable.
I mean, and that goes, to, yeah, no, it's like, it's crazy numbers. I
We're living
mean,
in a dream world.
I agree, but,
No,
This
but
is
when
vacation
you're,
land.
when you're talking,
Yeah,
the median
vacation.
income in this area is 48,000 approximately.
Right.
If you take 30% of that and break it out, and that's their monthly payment, you end up at about 278 to 300. And unfortunately, with the costs of everything, and it's only gonna go higher, and with, I really think building costs aren't gonna come down reasonably. It's tough. I mean, but you're talking about trying to bring in people, younger people that aren't going to be making 48,000. They're going to be making 32 to 37 or 38,000. So now you're bringing that number down. It's got to be
That's true.
278 or lower to be affordable, and the rents can't really be more than $900 to $1,100 to be
Which doesn't exist.
right.
Keep, yeah.
Yeah,
below the-
I'm
I
just
think-
telling you, you know, how the numbers kind of need to work, but they're not gonna work. I realize that. I mean, you can't take this and squish it into this. It doesn't fit.
Well,
But
they do that in Washington every day. Every day they do that down there. Make it
So-
work.
So that goes back to, you know, I also asked Jonathan, I said, just in case things, you know, don't pan out and this is just unrealistic for us to have housing and other things that New Height has wanted us to have, what ability do we have to dispose of the property? I mean, as near as I could figure, the only thing we were authorized to do is tax acquired property. So I guess what I would say is, based on the reply from the attorney, is to have one or the other of those ready to be put on the June ballot so that the voters can authorize us like they do with the tax acquired property.
Well,
It's
let's
some-
let EDC meet anyway, right?
No, yeah, but I mean, I'm just saying so that
That's where the,
for next
Yeah,
June,
we have time.
it can be added on with that one for any type of future
Yeah.
needs.
yeah.
Because we didn't know we couldn't until this came up, so.
Today,
Do we
That's
try?
30.
You're right, you know. So,
Yeah.
yeah, let the EDC do their thing and, you know,
Yeah.
and the deadline, whatever the deadline is. for
Early
the-
April.
Yeah, so I mean, just
Your
keep,
April meeting.
keep that in the back of your mind, or I
Yeah.
will to remind you, because we,
Oh, yeah. I imagine neither of us will forget. But
no.
the other thing I was gonna say though is, here's the other part of this. There is the penciling part of it, which you know I love that phrase.
No, I know you do.
But the other part of this is the community conversation, which happens around density and housing density, and what the community wants for housing density. And that's, to me, that was the louder, you know, we kind of avoided the conversation about cost, because, I mean, that was not about a cost in June, but it was definitely about people were seeing an image on the screen and they were saying, they were reacting to it, you know? And even those who probably saw the need, the real need for those $270,000, you know, dwellings and lower, the need for that, said, wow, it's a lot. Is that Rockport? Is that Rockport Village? Is that, and so that communication, that conversation, I think, going back to what the comp plan discussions about balance, right? And how do you find that balance? And maybe 84 units is a lot on 7 acres, but in you know, on that site, but maybe
Well,
there's something else. You know?
So as a side note to that, the meeting that Denise and I were at over at the Masonic Building, Curtis Ames, I always get it backwards, Curtis Ames
Ames
Curtis.
Curtis.
Curtis, yeah.
Because we had talked about the DOT lot and how, you know, there was potentially an opportunity to do a land swap
Yeah.
so that we could utilize the whole 7 acres. We could then do a recreation field over there. And she said, well, why don't you put housing over there? Do the land swap with DOT, put housing over there, and then, you know, we could ideally keep this as an open space.
Yeah.
Or we could put a lot fewer houses there
Yeah.
and put some houses over there and still maintain some of the field.
Which is
So-
what I think.
So, I mean, you know, I think the DOT thing should be, again, rehashed. I'm not sure Bill did his,
It's in here.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, that was off my list.
right. I'll
Just
stop.
for that.
I'll stop answering. I don't want to blow that one.
No, we can
I'll
blow
see.
it out now. I
I'll
don't
save
care.
my answer.
For the, no,
I don't have much of one.
that was for the same thing though, because I think that's a good spot.
Yeah.
It's
So that's J.
it's already near the school. I mean, it's kind of secluded. It's down in higher density housing. There wouldn't be as noticeable. It's near. It's off our sewer line. It's off our water lines. We don't have to worry so much about getting utilities to it.
Yeah.
Well,
It's not in the middle of town, and I just think it's a good spot to do it, assuming that soil tests and EPA and all that other stuff
That
work out.
Yeah.
That's gonna be a problem. There's not a live tree out back there. Anywhere.
Well, yeah, they never had a salt shed over there, and they just piled it,
No, they just kept piling
piled it
up,
outside.
so I guess that,
So it all runs downhill.
I mean, if on the sewer, Route 90 sewer
Yeah.
project, let's just hypothetically say you were gonna have, several houses out there
Yeah.
on that site, it's a 7-acre site. Would that bolster your request for funds,
Oh, for
grants?
grants,
For- yeah.
not economic development. Housing is like a no-go, which is frustrating, and they
We're trying to
understand
have
that.
economic
But
development without housing.
yeah, yeah, the new program manager person of contact, she gets that and understands it, and so she's got a creative way to work with us on the housing
All right.
aspect because she understands it.
If you don't have housing for places to work, then you don't have businesses for them to support. Then,
Exactly.
Then you get nowhere, and we're right where we are.
That's what's
Exactly.
happening.
We have chickens with no eggs, right? It's not a chicken or the egg.
Which,
it's
which they
this-
aren't right now,
this
because they're all
one.
molting.
Yeah, right, exactly.
That's where we are. We're all molting.
Yeah, yeah.
So
What, anybody else on that? I mean, the RES
So what has to
site?
happen on the, on the REA? I was
Isn't it,
back
have we
to-
finished did we finish the
I think,
RES site?
I think we
let's,
have.
let's hear from the Economic Development
Yep.
Committee. We'll just sort of keep it in good order.
Well, and that's fine, I mean, we just get them going again, and then they can come back to us, and then we can start talking about the project and get it percolating again.
Sure.
Now we're on the sidewalk.
We'll get into
All right, so,
Sidewalk in the way.
well, you know, I'll tell you, I was a skeptic, because I never saw a lot of people walking up and down, and I've been doing that road many a year. But I can tell you, of late, there have been
You see people,
a lot of people utilizing it, and I think it was some of the summer help that's now going back, you know, overseas. But anyway, the long story short, where I'm going with this is, and the Pathways Committee, admirable job. I mean, they went, they beat on doors, they got the grant money. It took 3 or 4 years to make it happen, maybe 5.
Yeah.
But it's happened, it looks good.
Yep.
So my point to this is, who's gonna maintain it in the wintertime? If we're gonna build something shiny and new, we're gonna take care of it.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about that.
Well, no, but you see, that's what I'm saying, when it comes time for grants to be presented from whomever, if there's an associated long-term cost, that needs to be, and they may not have their crystal ball to tell us what those are.
Right.
But they could give us ballpark costs associated with maintenance and/or replacement.
can our little sidewalk snowplower?
Could that handle that machine? Well, that was, I mean, they're gonna be going up. It feels like that should be, like a lot of times with these roads, you usually have one person does the whole thing. If there's like a little stretch that's in
It's Rockport.
one town, you say, just go the rest of the way, and then we'll catch it on
Most of
another
it's
side.
Camden's.
Most of it's Camden's,
What's
yeah.
the Camden?
And, you know, they do a whole
Well,
bunch of work
it's,
there.
I'd say a good 50% or more is ours. Because we're right across the street from the entrance to Hannaford.
Right.
That's true.
So from there uphill is only about 300 feet, 400 feet, and there's a good 300 yards going the other way. So there again, if it's there, who's gonna maintain it? How do you plan on having that happen this winter? Because
Yeah.
it's going to be expected.
It needs to be open.
We've got it,
It
it
has to
looks
be
good,
open.
it needs
Yeah.
to be maintained.
Yeah.
And, the idea that maybe we could work with Camden to snow blow it and we would do some mowing.
Right. And we have not, altered our agreements with our contractor who handles all of our sidewalk mowing, or plowing. But sidewalk mowing is something we might be able to
Well, I
offer
just-
and trade as a way to, we'll go up the hill and take the little esplanade or median or whatever they want to call it, and that way at least people feel as though we're
Well, somebody did, I think,
Yeah.
from Maritime Farms up to the top of the hill. I don't know who mowed it. I applaud them, because that's sort of a no man's
Yeah.
land. I mean, it's not in front of a business like the rest of it is, but, if that's the entrance coming into our town going south or their town going north, it needs to be looking good.
Yep.
Well, let's just put that as something to.
That's a good idea. Yep.
So,
That was something by the next meeting.
yeah. How's November looking for you?
Cold. Yeah, let me, I'll put something in my report. I mean, you can put it on the agenda, or I can just, stash it in the
Just-
report, whichever.
I
And
mean,
we
it-
can just get a report in terms of how we're gonna
Yep, I mean,
grapple with that one,
Yeah.
just, you
Report's
may
fine.
just update us in your manager's report that,
Yep,
you've altered the agreement with, David Petty or
you got it.
whomever. But, I just think, it's like when we do the one across 90.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but there again, I mean, we're gonna build it. Everybody wants it. So let's make it usable.
Yes.
And there's a cost associated with all that stuff, but that's the little piece that gets missing
Yep.
when time comes, it's,
Okay.
I know, it's cutting into, this is unusual for us to be here more than an hour and a half.
Well,
But I think we're getting a few things sort of aired and hashed and some direction. I don't know, who was the ARPA funds availability?
You,
And
yeah.
I think that was about utilizing it potentially to help offset engineering costs.
Yeah, I mean, you could, right, I mean.
I don't know how much those would be, but,
Right, that was, so as I kind of detailed here, so you had two allocations of $177,000. Not 2 months ago, but August of 2021.
we're in the second year of the second allocation.
Right, the board voted in late August that, of 21, that it would dedicate, that first allocation to broadband. We haven't expended the funds, but sort of that was what the board's working sort of conversation had been. And that was the vote that night. And then we received the second allocation of ARPA funds this past May, which is again $177,000. So, as we went through at that time, there's a narrow defined lane that we can spend this money within. Wastewater, broadband, public health.
I thought they expanded that.
Yeah.
might be some
I think
more.
they added
They
like
did,
three more
but-
categories to include like safety officers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But still.
It seemed like the two top ones on the list were the two top ones for Rockport. too.
Right.
Broadband and wastewater.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So I didn't really look too hard down the list. I said, well,
So,
seems like we have some needs there. But those funds are still available for you to make a decision upon.
well, I mean, I think
You
the
know.
first decision was fine. I mean, as far as using half of it for the broadband, and I think, because that's part of an infrastructure. And my only, and I'll say it again, because I'll say it when the time comes, is our broadband going to be considered a public utility?
Yes. What's happening with that now is GWI, who operates the 2-mile line through the village, which is owned by the town of Rockport, but GWI provides the services on it. They're applying for a grant that will include Rockport residences I'm not sure the exact timing on the grant, either end of this month or first part of November for this big tranche of money that the state has. And that would provide 75% funding, and then you need matching funds for the other 25%, which can be revenue bonds, but it can also be, and not revenue bonds that the town of Rockport would get, but that MIDC would get.
So I don't want to be the devil's advocate, but I will be. I mean, if we're considering it a public utility, like our sewer system is, when our sewer system goes by someone's house, even though they're not hooked into it, they have to pay a fee.
Yeah, I don't know.
So that's where my concern is.
That's a different, I mean, sewers,
It's public utility. I mean,
well,
I
but
don't
so
know.
is a power line, and, I mean,
But it's not owned by us. The power line isn't owned by us.
yeah. I mean, I don't know where the sewer stuff,
I-
if that's
So I guess that's my question going down that road, Jonathan, is if it's gonna be going by everybody's house,
Yeah.
is there gonna be any fee that we're going to, because the people with the sewer are gonna say, well, you're charging us money.
Yeah.
We're not hooked up to it.
Well, we're not doing that now. I mean, through the 2-mile loop, we're not charging people, even though it
But
goes
not under
by,
the
but-
current, I mean, under the current system. I
but in
mean,
a
where I
different-
am, we're not hooked up to it, but you still pay a fee because it goes by your house. So that's my point is that the same sort of circumstance when it comes to broadband, if it is a public utility
well, the interesting thing
run by
about
us?
broadband is it makes money for.
Well, I mean, the sewer does too. I mean, well,
Yeah, but
I'm not
it
talking
basically
about
pays
whether
its
it makes.
I mean, a
I'm not-
sewer is, yeah.
I'm not talking about whether it makes money or doesn't make money. I mean, you're charging one group of people for something that goes by their house that's owned by us, and now you're gonna put something else by their house. Somebody's gonna be upset. Because these guys are gonna say, well, you're charging us, but you're not charging them, and they're both being run by Rockport.
Yeah, but there's a choice in broadband, there's not a choice in sewer.
Well, there is a choice. If your system doesn't fail, you don't have to hook into it, but you still have to
True.
pay the town, because it goes by your house.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess, a question that would be
Something to
something
be
that
looked
John could look into. I mean,
Yeah, well,
I'm just, because
yeah.
it was asked of me, and I'm just asking
I think it's,
it out loud.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what because then you're getting into, well, if that was the case, then all cable companies would say, well, you gotta pay. But they're not, I realize they're not publicly owned, but
It's a different economic structure, but we can certainly get more information on.
Yeah.
Just want to be ready when the time comes.
Yep, no,
Yeah,
I think we can
yeah.
explain more about why it works the way it works versus how a sewer.
Is Rockport doing that alone now, or what?
No, they're part of the Midcoast Internet Development Corporation, so that's who's, but it'll be Rockport's system. It's Rockport will get the grant money will be allocated to Rockport for this.
So you're going to look into that little bit of it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
Well,
in my uninformed mind, I mean, it's sort of apples to apples.
Right.
One entity owning two utilities. You currently charge for one if you're not hooked up to it. It's gonna be the same if the other one goes down. I mean, because you're still gonna be making money on it if they don't want to hook up to it, because you'd be
Right.
doing sort of what they would call a stub fee, like they
Well,
do
right,
for the
that's what I
sewer.
was- yeah, it wouldn't necessarily be the full charge, it'd be,
Yeah.
right, some sort of
You know, but
nominal thing.
just a question. All right, so, let's get on to
I'm
it.
sure they'll need so many people to hook up to make it pay for itself.
yeah, well, it's a 30% take rate is what all the economics are based on, that 30% of the people who have the lines going by will. And it'll be cheaper than anything anybody can get from current internet providers. Now, whether they don't do internet at all, that's a different question.
Even Fidium, they can beat Fidium.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Well,
Well, Fidium's got their 12-month deal, right? Everybody gets a great deal the first 12 months, and then it changes. And it'll beat Fidium's. Right. Fidium's
Discussion,
got to pay stockholders. Fidium has to pay stockholders.
discussion of the Route 17 property and potential foreclosure process.
Yeah, I mean, so this is a property that has been in, I think I'd say in the foreclosure process. Maybe that's the safest way to say it. There has been a satisfactory amount of time for the lien to mature to the point where foreclosure is allowed and we could accept the property, but there are title issues and the like that go with that. The challenge at present would be through foreclosure would be that the property is occupied and you would have to explore the eviction process if you wish to sort of continue to go down that road. Probably too much more that I say than that, probably should be executive session, but it at least gives you a sense of where that is. There's another property that we are looking at for dangerous buildings. Scott and Orion and Phil and I have sort of been talking about that as well. I expect there'll be some movement on that. He sent a letter to meet on that property over the next 2 weeks, so we should have some forward movement on that one as well. But I think probably the next, as I understand, the next step is to determine the occupants, and then the question would be how quickly would you want to move, and at what time of year, and you and I were talking about that.
Yeah,
today.
This is one of those ones where the owner of the property has passed away some years ago.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not going to get into a great deal of detail, but the agreement was at the time the person that's there now would continue to pay the taxes. Well, that stopped,
Yeah.
and subsequently, we have somebody that represents the estate, doesn't want to do a lot because they're not going to get paid.
Right.
So we have a piece of property that we almost sold, but we couldn't because we had a tenant.
Yeah.
I mean, well, we didn't have a tenant because it wasn't ours.
Right.
But, so I guess I'm of a mindset, let's get it done. Because we're, not only aren't we getting the taxes now, somebody's getting a free ride by staying there.
Right.
And if somebody bought the property, then we would at least be getting taxes from it.
Yeah. Right. And I think the building is of concern.